This man turned the most powerful villain in history into a pile of ash, made Bakugo freeze mid-explosion with one look, and kissed Mina Ashido on live television in front of 60,000 people. Izuku Midoriya said, "Screw your hero rules," and the whole damn world agreed. What the hell?
Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
Musutafu General Hospital, a regular delivery room. Izuku Midoriya, age 23, green-haired, soft-spoken, 5'2", lay in that bed screaming the way every mother screams when bringing life into the world. The doctors were ready. The machines beeped. The lights hummed. Everything was normal until her son came out with horns. The first nurse to hold him dropped him. Not because she was clumsy, because the moment the baby opened his eyes, both of them burning ruby red. The air in the delivery room tripled in temperature and the overhead lights exploded. Every single one. Glass rained down like confetti. The sprinkler system kicked in. And there, in the arms of his terrified mother, a newborn boy with crimson hair and black horns stared up at the ceiling with an expression no infant should have. He wasn't crying. He was watching. The doctors didn't know what to make of him. The quirk specialists didn't either. His father, Hisashi Midoriya, had a fire-breathing quirk. His mother could pull small objects toward her. Neither of those explained horns. Neither explained crimson hair. Neither explained eyes that glowed faintly in the pitch black when the power went out 2 hours later. And the boy just sat in his crib, silent, staring at the door like he was waiting for something to walk through it. The first diagnosis came back at age 2. Quirk, unclassified. Physical mutations present, cranial horns, pigment anomalies, hair, iris. The doctor suggested further testing. The second diagnosis came at age 3 after Izuku melted a playground swing set because a dog scared him. The fire that came from his hands wasn't orange, wasn't red, wasn't blue. It was black. Jet black. Flames the color of a starless sky that burned hot enough to warp the metal frame into slag and scorch the concrete beneath it into glass. That fire had a name, eventually. Years later, when UA processed his admission paperwork, they would classify it under the quirk name Izuku chose himself, Kijin, Ogre, God. But we'll get there. For now, understand this. Izuku Midoriya did not grow up the way other children grew up. He didn't stumble into his power. He didn't discover it accidentally and cry about it. The moment he first drew those black flames from his palms at age 3, standing in the smoking ruin of that playground, he looked at his hands and smiled. Not a child's smile. Something older than that. Something that remembered. Even if he didn't. Izuku Midoriya loved her son. She loved him fiercely, and without condition. But she was also, in her honest moments, afraid of him. Not because he ever hurt her. He never did. Not once. Not even when his temper flared and the temperature in the apartment spiked until the wallpaper curled. He was always gentle with her. Always soft-spoken. Always brought her tea in the mornings and told her the food was good even when she burned dinner. He was her boy. But she saw the way people looked at him when they walked down the street. The whispers. The stares. The mothers pulling their children closer. A boy with horns, with red eyes that caught the light wrong. With an aura that pressed against the skin of anyone standing too close, like the air itself was heavier around him. The neighborhood feared him. The other kids avoided him. And Izuku Midoriya did not care. That's the thing people never understood about him. Even later, even when his name was on every screen in Japan, he didn't need approval. He didn't need validation. He didn't walk into rooms hoping people would accept him. He walked into rooms the way a predator walks into open ground, aware of everything, indifferent to most of it, and absolutely certain of where he stood in the hierarchy at the top. Always at the top. By age 6, he had already begun training with a katana. Nobody taught him. That's the part that unsettled people. Inko came home from the grocery store one afternoon to find her 6-year-old son in the backyard, barefoot, swinging a wooden bakken through a series of forms so clean, so fluid, so impossibly practiced that she dropped her bags on the kitchen floor and just watched through the window. His movements had no wasted motion. His footwork was rooted and balanced. His strikes flowed one into the next like water over stone. She asked him later where he learned it. He paused for a long time before answering. "I don't know," he said. "My body just knows." She didn't ask again. By age 8, he had graduated to a real blade. A local smith, an old man named Kuroda who ran a traditional forge in the ward, took one look at the boy, at the horns, the eyes, the way he carried himself even at 8 years old, and forged him a katana without asking for payment. He said it felt right. He said the boy reminded him of old stories. Warrior spirits. Oni who walked the earth in human skin, Izuku accepted the blade with a bow. The steel was beautiful. Simple. The handle wrapped in black cord, the guard plain iron, the blade slightly curved and polished to a mirror shine. He named it nothing. It didn't need a name. It was an extension of his arm. That was enough. By age 10, he could coat the blade in black flames at will. The fire would crawl from his palm up through his grip, across the steel, and the blade would burn with that impossible pitch-black flame that gave off heat you could feel from 20 feet away. He practiced in an empty lot behind the apartment complex. Nobody went near that lot anymore. The scorch marks on the concrete told them everything they needed to know. He grew fast, tall for his age, broad-shouldered, built like someone who had been forged rather than born. His crimson hair grew wild and long, framing those black horns and falling across his red eyes in a way that made him look like something out of a myth. By the time he was 12, adults crossed the street when they saw him coming. Not because he did anything threatening, just because of what he was. Presence. That's what it was. An aura that pressed against the chest, a weight in the air when he entered a room. The sense that the oxygen itself was being taxed by his existence. He was 12 years old and already carried himself like a warlord. And it was at 12 that his life changed direction forever. Not because of All Might. Not because of a villain. Not because of some grand revelation about heroism or destiny. Because of a girl with pink skin and tears on her face. It was a Thursday afternoon in early spring. Cherry blossoms on the wind. The schoolyard was emptying out. Most kids had already left. But behind the gymnasium building, in the narrow strip of dirt between the wall and the chain-link fence, a group of 5 boys had cornered someone. Izuku heard the crying first. He'd been walking the perimeter of the school grounds. He always took the long way, always scanned, always kept his senses open, a habit so deep he didn't even think about it. And the sound stopped him mid-step. That he rounded the corner. 5 boys. 12, 13 years old. 3 of them had minor quirks. One had oversized fists, another had hardened skin on his knuckles, the third could spark static from his fingertips. The other 2 were just followers. They stood in a half circle, and in the center of that circle, with her back against the brick wall and her arms wrapped around her knees, was a girl Izuku had never seen before. Pink skin. The color of cherry blossoms, bright and vivid and unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Her hair was a wilder shade of the same pink, tangled and messy. Her eyes were large and black, no irises, no white, just solid black sclera with golden pupils that caught the light like a cat's. Small horns, barely more than nubs, poked from her hairline. She was beautiful. She was also crying so hard she could barely breathe. The ringleader, the one with oversized fists, was standing closest. He had a stick in his hand and was poking her arm with it like she was something dead on the sidewalk. "Look at her skin," he said, laughing. "She looks like bubblegum somebody chewed up and spit out." "Monster girl," another one added. "Bet she melts stuff with that acid. Gross." "Nobody's going to be friends with you," the ringleader said, leaning down close. "You're a freak. Even the other freaks don't want you." The girl, Mina Ashido, though Izuku didn't know her name yet, buried her face deeper into her knees and sobbed. And Izuku Midoriya felt something move through him that wasn't anger. It was older than anger, deeper. A recognition, a resonance. He looked at those small horns on her head. He looked at the pink skin that made her different. He looked at the tears streaming down her face, and somewhere inside him, in a place he couldn't name and didn't try to, something locked into place. He moved. The ringleader didn't even hear him coming. 1 second he was laughing, stick in hand. The next, Izuku's grip was around his wrist. The boy looked up. Red eyes stared down at him. Black horns. A face carved from stone. Izuku broke his arm. Clean. Fast. One motion. He gripped the wrist, braced against the elbow, and snapped. The crack echoed off the gymnasium wall. The boy screamed. The stick clattered to the ground. Izuku released him and let him crumple, then turned to the other 4. 2 of them ran immediately. Smart. The third, the one with hardened knuckles, swung at Izuku's face. Izuku caught the fist in his palm. Squeezed. The boy's eyes went wide. Then Izuku headbutted him. His horn caught the boy across the bridge of the nose. Blood sprayed. The boy dropped like a bag of sand. The 4th backed into the fence. Izuku didn't even look at him. He just flared his presence, that pressure, that weight, and the boy fainted standing up, slid down the chain link, and folded onto the dirt. 4 down, 3 seconds, maybe 4. The ringleader was still screaming, clutching his bent arm. Izuku stood over him. The shadows fell across his face. His red eyes burned. "If you ever come near her again," he said, "I will do worse." That was it. No shouting, no speeches. Just a promise delivered in a voice that hadn't cracked yet but already carried the weight of absolute certainty. The ringleader nodded through his tears and crawled away. Then there was silence. Just the wind. The distant sound of traffic. Cherry blossoms drifting through the gap between the buildings. Izuku turned to the girl. She was staring at him. Eyes wide, gold pupils shining, tears still wet on her pink cheeks. She looked terrified. She looked amazed. She looked like she was trying to decide whether the boy standing in front of her was a dream or a nightmare. Izuku knelt down. He didn't crouch. He didn't squat. He knelt, one knee on the dirt, so he was at her eye level. He reached out with his right hand, the same hand that had just broken a boy's arm, and pressed his thumb gently against her cheek. He wiped the tears away, slowly, carefully, like she was something precious. "You don't look like a monster, Mina," he said. She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He glanced at her school bag. The name tag was hanging from the zipper. She let out a shaky laugh. He smiled. A real one, the kind that softened the sharp lines of his face and made his red eyes look warm instead of terrifying. "Your looks make you unique," he said. "The horns, the pink skin, I think you're beautiful." The tears came back, but different this time. Not from pain. "You're going to be an amazing hero," he told her. Mina Ashido, 12 years old, pink-skinned and black-eyed and sobbing behind a gymnasium, looked at the crimson-haired boy with black horns and red eyes and a presence like a bonfire, and something in her chest cracked open and let the light in. She grabbed his hand, both of hers wrapped around his one. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Izuku. Izuku Midoriya." "Izuku," she repeated like she was memorizing the shape of it. She didn't let go of his hand for the rest of the afternoon. They sat there together behind that gymnasium until the sun turned gold and the shadows stretched long, and she told him everything about the bullying, the loneliness, the way people flinched when she touched them because they thought her acid would burn. And he listened. He listened the way he did everything else, completely, with his full attention, without interruption. When she finally ran out of words, she asked him, "Why do people call you scary?" He looked at her. "Because I am. You're not scary to me." Good. From that day forward, Izuku Midoriya and Mina Ashido were inseparable. They walked to school together. They trained together. She pushed his boundaries, made him laugh, dragged him out of his own intensity with her relentless energy and her ridiculous jokes and her smile that could light a room on fire more effectively than his quirk ever could. And he anchored her. He stood between her and every cruel word, every sideways glance, every whispered insult. He was her wall, her flame, her fixed point. By the time they were 14, everyone knew. Not because they announced it, because it was obvious. The way he looked at her when she talked, the way she leaned into him when they stood together, the way his hand always found the small of her back and her fingers always tangled with his. They didn't hide it. Izuku Midoriya did not hide anything. And when UA entrance exam day came, the day that would decide whether they walked through those legendary gates or not, they stood side by side outside the testing facility, the spring wind in their hair, and Mina looked up at him. "Ready?" she asked. He looked down at her. Red eyes, steady, warm. Always. She grinned. He didn't smile, he smirked. That sharp, confident edge of his mouth that made people either swoon or sweat. They walked in together. The world was about to learn what it felt like to stand in the shadow of a war god. The UA entrance exam was held across multiple testing zones. Ground Beta, Fake City. Fake City. 4 classes of robots, 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer, and the 0-pointer, which was worth nothing and existed solely to test courage under pressure. That was the official explanation, anyway. Izuku didn't care about the scoring system. He cared about one thing, that Mina was fighting beside him. The gates opened. 200 examinees surged forward into the fake city streets, scrambling over rubble, shouting, activating quirks in every direction. It was chaos. A girl with vines for hair was swinging between buildings. A boy with engines in his calves was sprinting ahead of everyone. A blonde kid with a naval laser was spinning in circles and firing beams at everything. Izuku walked. He walked into Ground Beta like he was entering his own living room. Mina jogged beside him, acid already dripping from her palms, pink face split in a wild grin. She loved this. The adrenaline, the competition, the chance to prove everyone wrong. A 2-pointer burst through the wall to their left. Mina didn't even flinch. She flung a wide arc of acid that ate through its legs. It toppled forward, crashing into the pavement, and she hopped onto its back and dissolved its core processor with a concentrated stream that burned through the armor plating in seconds. 2, she shouted, throwing a fist in the air. Izuku's mouth twitched. A 3-pointer rolled around the corner ahead of them. Massive. Tank treaded. Twin cannons mounted on its shoulders. It locked onto Izuku and fired. He drew his katana. The blade cleared the sheath and the world changed. Black flames erupted along the steel like a living thing, writhing, hungry, impossibly hot. The air around the blade warped and bent. The first cannon shot hit the flat of the blade and evaporated. The second never arrived. Izuku closed the distance in a single step and swung. One cut. The 3-pointer split in half from shoulder to hip. Both halves slid apart with a groan of tortured metal. Before they hit the ground, the black flames ate them. The steel didn't melt. It didn't warp. It ceased to exist. One moment there was a 3-story robot. The next there was ash raining from the sky like black snow. Mina watched it happen and let out a whistle. Show off. Efficient, he corrected. They moved through the city like a 2-person army. Mina took the small ones, darting between 1-pointers and 2-pointers with the agility that came from years of breakdancing and acid surfing, dissolving joints, melting treads, laughing the entire time. Izuku handled the big ones. He didn't rush, he didn't strain. Every movement was clean and economical. Draw, cut, sheath, ash, repeat. In 7 minutes, they had cleared 3 city blocks. Present Mike's voice boomed over the speakers. Whoa! Looks like we've got a power couple tearing through Ground Beta. Examinee 2801, Midoriya, is on an absolute rampage. His current tally is... A pause. Wait, seriously? 43? And we're only 8 minutes in? In the observation room, a dozen UA faculty members sat behind screens watching every testing ground simultaneously. Principal Nezu sipped his tea. Recovery Girl had her clipboard balanced on her knee. Midnight was leaning forward with both hands on the desk. 13 was frozen mid-gesture. Cementos had stopped chewing his rice ball. And All Might, Toshinori Yagi, the symbol of peace, standing in the back row in his deflated form with his hands in his pockets, stared at the screen showing Ground Beta with an expression that had gone very, very still. On screen, Izuku Midoriya walked through a cloud of smoke, katana resting on his shoulder, black flames trailing from the blade like a banner. Behind him, a trail of ash and scorched concrete stretched 3 blocks long. His crimson hair caught the wind. His black horns rose above the smoke like a devil's silhouette. What is his registered quirk? All Might asked. Nezu checked his tablet. Kijin, he said. Self-named, ogre god. All Might said nothing. Interesting boy, Nezu added, taking another sip of tea. Very interesting. Then the ground shook. Not a tremor. A full seismic event. The buildings swayed, windows cracked, a roar. Not electronic, not recorded. Something designed to vibrate in the chest and loosen bowels, rolled across Ground Beta like a tidal wave. The 0-pointer emerged. It came from behind the skyline like a mountain deciding to take a walk. 10 stories tall, treads the size of buses. a single red eye glowing in its massive head, scanning the streets below. Its arm alone was bigger than the buildings flanking the road. Every examinee within visual range did the same thing. They ran, panic, screaming, stampeding over each other to get distance. The girl with vine hair swung away. The engine leg boy rocketed in the opposite direction. The laser boy tripped and fell flat on his face before scrambling to his feet and sprinting. Mina grabbed Izuku's sleeve. "That thing is huge," I noticed. "Are you going to—" Yes, she looked at his face, red eyes locked on the machine. No fear, no tension. Nothing but the steady, even focus of someone who had already decided the outcome. She let go of his sleeve. "Go get it, babe." He glanced at her. The corner of his mouth pulled up. Then he turned and walked toward the zero-pointer. The examinees who were running saw him. They saw the crimson-haired boy with the horns walking, not running, not sprinting, walking, toward the largest robot any of them had ever seen. Some of them stopped. Some of them couldn't look away. Izuku stopped 50 meters from the zero-pointer's base. It loomed above him, blocking out the sun. Its eye focused on him. The arm began to move, rising, cocking back, preparing to crush everything in a city block. Izuku sheathed his katana. He raised his right hand, palm open, facing the machine, and the air changed. Everyone felt it. Every examinee in ground beta. Every observer in the control room. The temperature spiked, then dropped, then spiked again. The atmosphere became heavy. Gravity seemed to increase. Breathing became harder. A pressure, immense, ancient, wrong, descended on the testing ground like an invisible hand pressing down on the world. In the observation room, Recovery Girl's clipboard slid off her knee and at the flint hit the floor. She didn't pick it up. She was gripping the armrests of her chair. "What is this?" Midnight whispered, All Might's fists clenched in his pockets. Izuku's open palm faced the zero-pointer. Above it, the air ignited. Black flames. Not a trickle, not a stream, a compression of fire so dense it looked like a miniature black sun swelled into existence. It spun, it pulled light into itself. The concrete beneath Izuku's feet began to crack, then glow, then melt. The asphalt turned liquid. Street signs within 30 meters bent toward the sphere like flowers leaning toward a sun. The zero-pointer's arm came down, a building-crushing blow. The fist descended. Izuku's eyes didn't waver. Hellflare. He released it. The sphere launched from his palm with no fanfare, no scream, no battle cry. It left his hand and crossed the 50 meters to the zero-pointer's torso in less than a heartbeat. And for 1 second, one single, hanging second, there was silence. Then the zero-pointer erupted. The black flames didn't explode the machine. They consumed it. From the point of impact, a sphere of pitch-black fire expanded outward, devouring metal and circuitry and reinforced titanium as if it were paper. The robot's torso vanished first, then its arms, then its head. The fire climbed upward like a living thing, hungry, relentless, eating through 10 stories of military-grade machinery in under 3 seconds. The heat wave that radiated outward flattened every examinee within 100 meters. Not injuries, just the sheer kinetic push of displaced air. Windows in a 6-block radius blew out simultaneously. The zero-pointer was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Where it had stood, there was nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no scrap metal, just ash. A towering column of ash that hung in the air for a moment, caught the wind and scattered across ground beta like gray snow. The ground was scorched black in a perfect circle around where Izuku stood. The asphalt had been turned to glass. He lowered his hand. He exhaled. Then he turned around, walked back to Mina, and the world was still trying to process what it had just witnessed. Mina was staring at him. Her mouth was open. Her golden eyes were huge. Acid dripped from her fingertips. Forgotten. That, she said, was the hottest thing I have ever seen. He stopped in front of her. Debris was still raining from the sky, tiny flakes of ash and fragments of scorched concrete. One landed in her hair. He reached up and brushed it away. Then he cupped her chin, tilted her face up, and kissed her. Right there. In the middle of ground beta. With 200 examinees staring, with cameras rolling, with the entire UA faculty watching through their monitors. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, her hands on his chest, rising on her toes. And when they broke apart, she was smiling so wide, it looked like her face might crack. In the observation room, Present Mike's microphone clattered to the desk. Did he just... He did, Midnight confirmed, fanning herself with her hand. Recovery Girl stared at the screen. She slowly bent down, picked up her clipboard, and wrote one word across the top of Izuku Midoriya's file: monster. She underlined it twice. All Might hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He stood in the back of the room and watched the screen where a 15-year-old boy with horns and crimson hair stood in the center of a glass crater, arm around the waist of a pink-skinned girl, and looked directly into the camera with those red eyes. Toshinori Yagi felt something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know if it was hope or fear. The acceptance letters went out. Izuku Midoriya, first place. Highest villain point score in the history of the entrance exam. Highest total score in the history of the entrance exam. Mina Ashido, ninth place, with an outstanding performance in both combat and rescue categories. They opened their letters together in Izuku's apartment. Inko cried. She always cried. But she also baked a cake and hugged them both so tight that Mina's acid accidentally ate a hole in the back of Inko's apron, which made everyone laugh until Inko cried again. 2 weeks later, they walked through the gates of UA together. If you've never seen UA's campus in person, it's hard to describe the scale. The main building rises like a monument to everything heroism aspires to be. Glass and concrete and gleaming steel, designed to inspire awe and remind every student who enters that they are walking into the most elite hero training institution on the planet. Izuku walked in like he was visiting a mid-range restaurant. Mina was vibrating with excitement beside him, bouncing on her toes, pointing at everything, talking a mile a minute. He let her pull him along by the wrist, red eyes sweeping the hallways, cataloging exits and sightlines out of pure habit. Classroom 1A. They were both assigned to it. The door was massive, built for students with mutation quirks, designed to accommodate everything from extra limbs to extreme height. Izuku pushed it open and stepped inside. 20 desks, 18 students already seated or standing. The morning light coming through the windows caught his crimson hair and his horns, and every head in the room turned. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of teenagers sees something they cannot immediately categorize. A boy with red hair and black horns, ruby eyes, a katana on his hip, a build that looked carved from stone, an aura that pressed against the walls, and beside him, a pink-skinned girl with golden eyes and a grin that could start a riot. Morning, Mina said, bright and loud and utterly unbothered by the staring. Izuku said nothing. He scanned the room, cataloged every face, filed them. Blonde boy with a permanent scowl and palms that smelled like nitroglycerin, Bakugo. Red and white-haired boy with a burn scar over his left eye, Todoroki. Tall boy with engines in his calves, Ida. Brown-haired girl with round cheeks, Uraraka. A boy with red hair spiked up like a crest, Kirishima. A girl with a black ponytail and an expression of polite assessment, Yaoyorozu. He noted them. Moved on. He and Mina took their seats. He settled into his chair, legs stretched, arm draped across the back of Mina's chair beside him. She leaned into the space between them and started whispering about which classmates she wanted to befriend first. Then, Bakugo stood up. Katsuki Bakugo. Top of his middle school. Winner of the Junior Combat League 3 years running. The kid who'd been told since birth that he was the best, the strongest, the future #1. He had the personality of a hand grenade with the pin pulled and the talent to back up at least half his arrogance. He'd also gotten the second highest score on the entrance exam. Second, behind someone he'd never heard of, he stormed across the classroom to Izuku's desk, hands already sparking, teeth bared, eyes wide and furious. "You're the one who got first place?" he snarled. Izuku looked at him the way someone looks at a barking dog, not with hostility, with mild inconvenience. "Yes." "Bullshit. I saw the footage. What the hell kind of quirk melts a 0-pointer to nothing? You think you're better than me?" The room held its breath, 20 pairs of eyes locked on the confrontation. Kirishima was half out of his seat. Ida's hand was raised like he wanted to intervene but couldn't figure out the protocol. Uraraka's eyes bounced between the two like watching a tennis match played with live ammunition. Izuku didn't stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He looked at Bakugo with those flat red eyes and said, "I don't think I'm better than you. I know I am." The temperature in the room shifted. Bakugo's explosions crackled louder. His hands shook. "Say that again, you horned freak. Watch your tone, loudmouth." Izuku's voice dropped. Lower, colder, colder. The kind of cold that burns. "Or I'll turn you into cinders." He didn't stand, he didn't flex, he didn't summon any fire. This time, he simply let the smallest fraction of his presence roll forward. That aura, that weight, the killing intent that lived in his body like a second heartbeat, and it hit Bakugo like a wall. Bakugo froze, mid-step. His explosions sputtered and died. His palms went dry, his throat locked. Every instinct in his body, every survival mechanism coded into human DNA over millions of years of evolution, screamed at him that the thing sitting at that desk was a predator, and he was prey. He could not move. 3 seconds, 5, 7. Then Izuku blinked, and the pressure vanished like a switch had been flipped. Bakugo stumbled backward. His breathing was ragged. His hands trembled. He looked at Izuku like he was seeing him for the first time. Izuku yawned. Mina leaned into his shoulder. "You didn't need to scare him that bad, babe? He'll live." Kirishima let out a breath he'd been holding for 10 seconds. "Holy crap," he whispered. Todoroki in the back corner watched the entire exchange with narrowed, mismatched eyes. His right hand, the ice side, was gripping his desk hard enough to frost the wood. The classroom door slid open. A yellow sleeping bag rolled across the threshold. Inside it, a man with long, black hair, tired eyes, and a capture scarf wound around his neck like a snake. Shota Aizawa, pro-hero eraserhead. Homeroom teacher for Class 1A, he stood up out of the sleeping bag like a corpse rising from a coffin, looked at the class with the enthusiasm of someone filling out tax forms, and said, "It took you 8 seconds to settle down. That's 8 seconds wasted. Time is not something heroes can afford to waste." He reached into the sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of PE uniforms. "Change into these. Meet me at Ground Gamma in 10 minutes. We're doing a quirk apprehension test." Confused murmurs rippled through the class. Ida raised his hand. "Sensei, what about the entrance ceremony?" "Irrelevant." Aizawa's dead eyes swept the room. They lingered on Izuku for a half-second longer than anyone else. "I run this class. I decide what's relevant. The student who scores lowest on this test will be expelled." The room erupted panic, protests. Uraraka's face went white. Ida sputtered about fairness. Yaoyorozu's composure cracked for the first time. Bakugo's scowl deepened. Kirishima flexed nervously. Izuku stood up, uniform in hand, and headed for the door. Mina hopped up beside him. "Expelled on day 1?" she said, linking her arm through his. "That's brutal." "He won't expel anyone," Izuku said. "How do you know?" "Because it's a scare tactic, and it's not a very good one." Aizawa, still at the front of the room, heard that. His eyes tracked Izuku's back as the boy walked out. He didn't disagree. Ground Gamma, an outdoor training facility with enough space for 50-meter sprints, ball throws, long jumps, grip tests, and everything else Aizawa had crammed into his 8-event gauntlet. The class assembled. 20 students in blue PE uniforms. The sun was bright. The air was cool. And Izuku Midoriya stood in the middle of the group with his katana still strapped to his hip because no one had told him to remove it, and he wouldn't have listened if they did. Aizawa explained the tests. Bakugo demonstrated the softball throw with an explosion-powered launch that sent the ball 400 meters. The tracker beeped. Bakugo grinned like he'd won the war. Aizawa handed the ball to Izuku. "Your turn, Midoriya." Izuku took the ball, weighed it in his palm, looked at it like it had personally insulted him. Then he reared back and threw. He didn't use his quirk. He didn't coat the ball in flames. He just threw it with the raw, physical strength of a body that had been training with a sword since age 6 and sparring against shadows that moved like memories of a past life. The tracker beeped. Aizawa looked at the screen. His expression, already flat, went even flatter. He turned the screen to face the class. 762 meters. No quirk. No enhancement, just pure arm strength. The class stared. "That's without his quirk," Ida said slowly, adjusting his glasses. "He threw it nearly twice as far as Bakugo, without his quirk." Bakugo's face went through several colors, none of them healthy. Mina pumped her fist. "That's my man!" Izuku tossed the tracker back to Aizawa. Next test. He placed first in every event. 50-meter dash, 2.1 seconds. Grip strength, the machine broke. Standing long jump, he cleared the sandbox entirely and landed on the track on the other side. Seated toe touch, he folded forward with the flexibility of someone who'd spent a lifetime in a warrior's body. Side steps, the class couldn't track him. Endurance run, he wasn't breathing hard after 20 minutes, and Aizawa called it because the rest of the class was dying. At the end, Aizawa displayed the rankings. Izuku was first by a margin so wide it looked like a different grading scale. Bakugo was 5th, Todoroki was 2nd, Mina landed 8th. Excellent acid mobility, strong agility, quick reflexes. She was thrilled. Aizawa looked at the last place student, a small boy with grape-like hair who had spent most of the test staring at the girls, and said, "Nobody's getting expelled. I lied. It was a rational deception to push you to your limits." Ida nearly collapsed. Uraraka actually did collapse, caught by Yaoyorozu. The class groaned in relief. Aizawa pocketed his phone and walked away. But as he passed Izuku, he slowed. Just a fraction. His eyes, those red, dry, endlessly tired eyes, met Izuku's. He didn't say anything. But later that evening, in the faculty lounge, he opened Izuku's file and wrote a single note in the margin. Eyes of a veteran killer. Handle with awareness. Then he closed the file, climbed into his sleeping bag, and went to sleep. The first week at UA passed fast. Class 1A settled into its rhythm. Heroics courses, ethics, history, combat theory. And at the center of it all, like a bonfire everyone orbited, was Izuku Midoriya. He didn't try to be the center of attention. He just was. In the lunchroom, students from other classes would find excuses to walk past his table. In the hallways, people parted for him without being asked. The horns, the red eyes, the katana. The way he moved, fluid and grounded, every step intentional, like the floor should be grateful he was walking on it. Mina thrived beside him. She was loud, bright, endlessly energetic, the kind of person who could befriend a brick wall. She pulled Kirishima into their orbit first, the red-haired boy with the hardening quirk who took one look at Izuku's warrior build and fighting spirit and declared him the manliest dude I've ever met. Then came Kaminari, the electric blonde who was more comedian than hero and who Mina laughed with until she wheezed. Then Sero, easygoing and steady, who provided the grounding element in an increasingly chaotic friend group. They ate together, trained together, studied together. Or more accurately, Izuku studied while the others copied his notes and pretended they understood the material. Mina and Izuku didn't hide their relationship. Not from anyone. During break periods, she sat on his desk. During lunch, his arm was around her shoulders. When they walked the halls, their fingers were laced together, and anyone who looked at them sideways got a glare from Izuku that could curdle milk. One afternoon, Mineta, the grape-haired boy who had nearly been expelled, made a comment about Mina's figure within earshot. Izuku was across the room in a heartbeat. He lifted Mineta off the ground by the collar with one hand and held him there, feet dangling at arm's length. Black flames licked across his knuckles. "I'm going to say this once," Izuku said, voice like cold iron. "If you ever speak about her like that again, I will hang you from the school flagpole by your ankles and leave you there until graduation." He dropped Mineta. The boy hit the floor, scrambled away, and never made another comment about Mina in his life. Mina watched from her desk, chin in her hand, smiling. My hero. Always. And then All Might arrived. The battle trial. Second week. All Might's first live exercise with Class 1A. He stood at the front of Ground Beta, a different section than the entrance exam, rebuilt and reinforced in his hero form. Towering. Golden. Smiling that smile that had launched 1,000 merchandise lines. "Today," he announced, voice booming, "you'll be doing heroes versus villains exercises. Team-based combat in an urban setting. The villain team must defend a fake weapon while the hero team tries to capture it." He held up a box of lots. Team assignments drawn at random, the team shook out. Izuku was paired with Kirishima on the villain side. Bakugo was paired with Ida on the hero side. The matchup. Bakugo and Ida versus Izuku and Kirishima. When the screen displayed the bracket, the entire class went silent. They remembered what happened on day one, the frozen explosions, the trembling hands, the aura that had stopped Bakugo in his tracks. Now they were being put in a building together, with no teachers inside. Bakugo looked at the screen. His jaw tightened, his palms crackled. He didn't say a word, but the fury in his eyes could have lit a city on fire. Izuku looked at the screen and said, "This will be quick. Man, I feel bad for them," Kaminari muttered from the observation room. "I don't," Mina said, arms crossed, smiling. The exercise began. Izuku and Kirishima were on the top floor of a 5-story building. The fake weapon, a massive papier-mâché missile, sat in the center of the room. Kirishima was buzzing with energy, hardened fists up, grinning. All right, how do we play this? You want me on defense while you... Stay by the weapon, Izuku said. I'm going to meet them. Kirishima blinked. Meet them? Like, go down? Yes. By yourself? Izuku didn't answer. He was already walking toward the stairs. Kirishima stared at his back. That dude is insane, he said to the empty room, grinning ear to ear. I love it. Bakugo and Ida entered the building from the ground floor. Ida was suggesting a tactical approach, systematic floor-by-floor sweep, pincer movement, covering each other's blind spots. Bakugo wasn't listening. He was hunting. He charged up the stairwell 2 steps at a time, palms sparking, teeth bared. He kicked open the door to the 3rd-floor hallway. Izuku was standing at the other end, arms crossed, katana on his hip, red eyes glowing faintly in the dimmed lighting. His crimson hair fell across his black horns, and his shadow stretched the length of the corridor. Bakugo stopped. For 1 second, just one, the memory of that killing intent flashed through his body like an electric shock. His muscles locked, his breath caught, then rage burned through the hesitation. You think you can fight me alone? He roared. I'll kill you! He launched himself forward, both palms lit up. Explosions propelled him down the hallway at blistering speed. He reared back his right gauntlet, the oversized bracer that stored his sweat and could channel it into a concentrated blast, and fired. The explosion was enormous. It blew the hallway apart. Walls crumbled. The ceiling cracked. Fire and smoke and shrapnel filled the corridor in a wave of destruction that would have killed a normal person 3 times over. In the observation room, All Might lurched forward. Young Bakugo. That was... The smoke cleared. Izuku stood exactly where he had been. Katana drawn. Blade held flat, edge on to where the blast had come from. The explosion had been parried, split down the middle. The force had been redirected into the walls on either side, which were now rubble. But Izuku himself was untouched. He hadn't moved his feet. You're too slow, he said, and your flames are weak. Bakugo screamed. Not words, just rage. Raw, broken, furious rage. He launched again, both hands. Rapid-fire explosions. Left, right, each one big enough to demolish a car. He poured everything into the assault, every drop of nitroglycerin his palms could produce, every ounce of fury his body could channel. Izuku parried. Every single one. His blade moved in tight, efficient arcs. Each explosion met the flat of the katana and deflected sideways, upward, into the floor. The shockwaves tore the building apart around them. Chunks of concrete fell. Rebar groaned. The floor cracked under the sustained punishment. But Izuku just stood there, unmoving, parrying an endless barrage of explosions with a single katana. Hit him! Bakugo screamed at himself. Hit him! He couldn't. Bakugo charged one massive blast, both hands together. Everything he had left. The gauntlet on his right arm reached critical, the pin pulled. The concentrated explosion rocketed from the bracer like a cannon shot. A beam of compressed force and flame that tore a trench in the concrete floor and blew out the exterior wall of the building. Izuku stepped to the side. The blast passed him by 2 inches and obliterated the wall behind him. He could see the sky through the hole. Then he moved. 1 step forward, his left fist coated in black flames, dense, burning, the fire clinging to his knuckles like liquid night. He drove that fist straight into Bakugo's stomach. The gauntlet on Bakugo's right arm cracked. Then it disintegrated. The black flames ate through the metal and polymer in a heartbeat, and the shockwave from the punch itself launched Bakugo off his feet. He flew backward down the hallway, hit the far wall, and went through it, and through the wall behind that, and the wall behind that. 3 walls. Bakugo punched through all 3 before he finally stopped, embedded in the load-bearing concrete of the building's outer structure. He hung there for a second, eyes glazed, blood trailing from his lip. Izuku walked through the holes. 3 rooms, 3 walls reduced to rubble. He stopped in front of Bakugo. Bakugo was still conscious, barely. His eyes were unfocused, his hands twitched, trying to spark, failing. His uniform was scorched. The gauntlet was gone. He looked up at Izuku through swollen eyes. Izuku drew his katana. He placed the tip against Bakugo's throat. Black flames licked along the blade, casting flickering shadows across both their faces. The heat made Bakugo's sweat evaporate on contact. The killing intent was suffocating. It filled the room like water filling a tank. Bakugo couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't speak. He could only stare at those flat red eyes and understand with absolute clarity that the boy standing in front of him could end his life in the time it took to blink. "Learn your place," Izuku said. He held the blade there for 3 seconds. Then he sheathed it, turned, and walked away. In the observation room, nobody spoke. Uraraka's hands were over her mouth. Her face was white. Ida's glasses had cracked. He'd gripped his own face so hard during the fight that the frames had snapped. Kaminari was pressed against the back wall like he was trying to phase through it. Yaoyorozu's composure had finally completely broken. She was gripping Jiro's arm hard enough to leave marks. Todoroki watched the screen. His expression hadn't changed, but his left hand, the fire side, was clenched so tight that tiny licks of flame were leaking between his fingers. All Might stood at the monitor. His mouth was open. He had been about to intervene twice during the fight. Both times, Izuku had ended the exchange before he could move. His hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. He had fought Nomu. He had fought all for one. He had stood against the worst the world had to offer, and he had never seen a 15-year-old fight with that level of absolute, effortless dominance. Young Midoriya wins the exercise, All Might said, his voice unusually restrained. Hero Team is defeated. Down in the building, Kirishima was sitting on the fake weapon with his legs crossed, hardened arms behind his head. He hadn't moved the entire fight. He didn't need to. Dude didn't even break a sweat, he said to himself, grinning. So freaking manly. Bakugo was pulled from the rubble by the rescue bots. He was conscious but refused to look at anyone. He sat in the infirmary with his fists balled on his knees and said nothing for 2 hours. That night, in the Class 1A group chat, Kaminari typed, "So is anyone going to address the fact that Midoriya just sent Bakugo through 3 walls with a single punch?" 17 students saw the message. Nobody replied. The following weeks at UA were the first time Izuku Midoriya experienced something close to routine. Classes in the morning, combat training in the afternoon, evenings spent in the common area of the dormitory, because yes, they'd been moved into dorms early. Principal Nezu citing security concerns that nobody fully believed, but everyone accepted. Izuku's room was on the top floor, corner unit. He'd pinned nothing to the walls. His futon was military tight. His katana rested on a stand by the window. The only personal touch was a framed photo on his desk, him and Mina at a summer festival 2 years ago. She was holding a candy apple and grinning. He was looking at her instead of the camera. Mina's room, by contrast, looked like a pastel bomb had detonated. Pink everything. Posters. Cushions. A disco ball she'd found at a thrift store. Fairy lights. And on her bedside table, a matching photo. Same festival, different angle. They spent most evenings together, sometimes in his room, sometimes in hers, sometimes in the common area with the rest of the squad. Kirishima would challenge Izuku to arm wrestling matches he always lost. Kaminari would try to teach Mina card tricks. Sero would tape things to the ceiling just to see how long before Aizawa noticed. It was warm. It was real. And it was the kind of normal that Izuku Midoriya hadn't known he needed until he had it. One evening, they were on the dormitory roof. Mina was lying on her back, legs crossed at the ankle, staring at the stars. Izuku sat beside her, one knee up, katana across his lap. "Hey," she said. "Hey, do you ever think about what comes after UA?" He looked down at her. "You mean pro-hero work? I mean everything. Where we'll live, what kind of heroes we'll be, whether we'll be one of those power couples the tabloids obsess over." She grinned. "Mina Ashido and Izuku Midoriya, the Acid Queen and the War God. They'll sell action figures of us." "I don't care about action figures." "I do. I want mine to have bendable arms." He almost smiled. "We'll figure it out. Together? Always together." She reached up and touched one of his horns. He let her. She was the only person on Earth he'd let do that. Her fingers traced the smooth black surface, following the curve from base to tip. "I love these," she said. "They're horns. They're your horns. That makes them the best horns." He looked at her, pink skin glowing faintly in the moonlight, golden eyes reflecting stars, smile wide and unguarded, and something in his chest expanded. The warrior in him, the predator, the force of nature that walked through walls and burned robots to ash, that part of him went still in her presence. Not weakened, never weakened, just at peace. "You're beautiful, you know that?" he said. She flushed darker pink. "You can't just say stuff like that." "I just did." She pulled him down by the collar and kissed him, head on the roof of UA under a sky full of stars with the distant lights of Musutafu spread out below them like a carpet of earthbound constellations. When they broke apart, she whispered, "Win everything. For me." "I always do," he said. She punched his shoulder. "Cocky. Accurate." She laughed, and the sound echoed across the rooftop, and for a moment the world was exactly as it should be. And then the world broke. It was a Thursday, 13 days into the semester. Class 1A was scheduled for rescue training at the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, the USJ, a massive indoor facility designed to simulate every conceivable disaster scenario. Floods, landslides, fires, storms, the works. Aizawa led them in. 13, the space-themed rescue hero, stood at the entrance to greet them. The facility stretched out below the raised platform like a domed arena, with distinct zones radiating outward from a central plaza. Mountain zone, flood zone, fire zone, and more. Aizawa was explaining the training format when the lights flickered. Everyone felt it at the same time. A heaviness, a wrongness, like the air pressure had dropped 30% in a single second. Izuku's eyes snapped to the central plaza. A swirl of black and purple mist was forming in the open space below them. Not a quirk test, not a simulation. The mist expanded, churned, and through it stepped figures. Dozens of them. Then dozens more. Villains, criminals, low-level thugs in masks and hoods, mixed with genuine threats in body armor and weaponized quirks, and at the center, two figures, a man covered in severed hands, pale skin, cracked lips, red eyes behind the fingers. He scratched his neck compulsively and surveyed the facility with the twitchy energy of someone balanced on the edge of a breakdown. Tamura Shigaraki, leader of the League of Villains, beside him a creature, massive, blacker than shadow, exposed brain, dead eyes, muscles layered on muscles, a body built in a lab and stitched together with hate. It stood 7 feet tall and didn't breathe in any rhythm that seemed natural. The Nomu. Behind them both, the mist villain, a being of swirling black fog with glowing yellow eyes. Kurogiri. Eraserhead and 13, Shigaraki rasped, loud enough to carry. And the brats, perfect. We came here to kill All Might, but he's not here. He tilted his head. The hand on his face shifted. Guess we'll settle for killing the kids. The class froze. Fear. Genuine, bone-deep, paralyzing fear. These weren't training dummies. These were real villains, real killers, the kind of people who showed up with the intention of ending lives. Aizawa activated his quirk. His hair rose. His eyes burned red. His capture scarf unfurled. 13. Protect the students, he said, already leaping from the platform toward the plaza. Get them to the exit. He dropped into the crowd of villains like a wrecking ball. Scarf snapping, fists connecting, quirks erased left and right. He was incredible, a one-man army holding a line against 100 opponents, but Izuku wasn't watching Aizawa, he was watching Shigaraki, watching the Nomu. Reading the situation the way a general reads a battlefield, his assessment took 3 seconds. Kurogiri warped. The black mist expanded across the platform, swallowing students in groups and scattering them across the facility. Todoroki vanished into the mountain zone, Bakugo into the ruins, Kirishima into the fire zone. Others, scattered, disoriented, separated from each other. The mist closed around Izuku and Mina. They landed in the central plaza. Ground Zero, right where the bulk of the villain forces were gathered. 50 villains, maybe 60. Armed with bats, pipes, blades, and an assortment of quirks that ranged from mildly inconvenient to legitimately dangerous. They were surrounded. Mina pressed her back to Izuku's. Her acid was already flowing, dripping from her fingers, eating into the concrete at her feet. Her expression had shifted, the bubbly energy replaced by the fierce focus of someone who had trained for exactly this. Izuku, she said. There's a lot of them. He looked at the ring of villains closing in, counted them, assessed their threat levels. Then he turned to Mina. He cupped her face in his hands, both hands, gently, the way he always held her, like she was the most important thing in any room. He tilted her face up, kissed her forehead, pressed his lips there for one long second. Stay here, babe, he said. I'll take out the trash. He stepped away from her, drew his katana. The blade cleared the sheath with a sound like a whispered promise, and black flames erupted along its length, hungry, writhing, burning so intensely that the nearest villains flinched backward from the heat. The first one to charge was a man with a blade quirk. Both forearms extended into serrated bone edges. He was fast, confident. He'd killed before. You could see it in the way he moved. Izuku cut him down mid-stride. One slash, horizontal. The bone blades didn't even slow the katana. The black flames caught the man's body before it hit the ground and reduced it to ash in under 2 seconds. The plaza went still. The other villains stared at the spot where their comrade had been standing. There was nothing left. Not a body. Not blood. Just a wisp of smoke and a scatter of gray ash already dispersing in the recycled air of the USJ. What the? One of them started. Izuku moved. He moved like fire given form, like a burning wind that tore through the crowd with the inevitability of a natural disaster. His katana was an extension of his arm. Each swing was a death sentence. Each step carried him into the next target without pause, without hesitation, without mercy. A villain with rock skin lunged at him from the left. The katana passed through the stone like it was paper, and the black flames ate through the mineral shell underneath. Ash, 2 villains with handguns opened fire from 20 meters. Izuku deflected one bullet with the flat of his blade. The steel didn't even vibrate. And the other passed through a wall of black flames he raised with his left hand and disintegrated before it reached him. He crossed the 20 meters in a heartbeat and cut both gunmen down in a single sweeping arc. Ash, a massive villain, 8 feet tall, muscled like a bear, quirk-enhanced strength, grabbed a chunk of concrete the size of a car and hurled it at Izuku. He didn't dodge, he swung upward. The blade split the concrete block in 2. The halves passed on either side of him and crashed behind him. He was already moving forward. The big man swung a fist the size of a watermelon. Izuku ducked it, stepped inside the reach, and drove his flame-coated blade through the villain's center mass, out the other side. The black flames erupted from the wound in both directions, and the villain was ash before his knees buckled. It went on. Villain after villain, wave after wave. They charged, they attacked, they screamed, they tried to overwhelm him with numbers, with quirks, with desperation. None of it mattered. Izuku moved through them the way a blade moves through smoke. Untouchable, unstoppable. Every swing precise, every kill absolute. The black flames didn't just burn, they consumed. Once they caught hold, they didn't stop. They ate through flesh and bone and armor and quirk-hardened skin with equal appetite. There was no surviving them. There was no resisting them. The fire of the Kijin recognized no defense. Within 3 minutes, the central plaza of the USJ smelled like burned air and ash. The floor was scorched black in wide arcs where the flames had touched down. Piles of gray ash, dozens of them, marked where villains had stood and charged and died. Izuku stood in the middle of it all. Katana resting on his shoulder, crimson hair stirred by the heat rising from the ground, black flames still flickering along the blade, casting his shadow in 3 directions at once. He was breathing evenly. His heartbeat was steady. There was not a single scratch on him. At the edges of the plaza, the surviving villains, the ones who had hung back, the ones who had seen what happened to the first wave, were running, scrambling over each other to reach the exits, tripping over their own feet. Some were crying. Some were screaming. One had dropped his weapon and was on his knees, hands over his head, begging no one in particular for mercy. Izuku watched them run. He gave them 3 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Then he hunted them down. It wasn't a chase. Chases imply some chance of escape. This was a harvest. Izuku crossed the plaza in a blur, black flames trailing behind him like wings, and he cut through the runners with the same efficiency he'd used on the ones who fought. A slash here, a burst of flame there. One tried to hide behind a pillar. The pillar and the man behind it burned to nothing. Another tried to use a hostage quirk, reaching for a stray student. Izuku's blade was through his wrist before the hand closed, and the black flames ate the severed appendage and the villain both before anyone could scream. When it was done, when the last of them was ash on the wind and the central plaza of the USJ had become a cremation field, Izuku stood alone in the middle of it and let the silence settle. Above, on the raised walkways overlooking the plaza, his classmates had gathered. The ones who'd been warped to other zones had fought their way back. Todoroki had frozen half the mountain zone. Bakugo had blasted through the ruins. Kirishima and Kaminari had brawled through the fire zone. They'd arrived expecting a battle. They arrived to a graveyard. Kirishima was the first to speak. "Bro," he said, voice hollow, staring at the ash-covered plaza. He soloed the entire villain army. In minutes, Yaoyorozu added. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He eliminated over 50 combatants in under 5 minutes. Uraraka was trembling, tears on her cheeks. Not from sadness, from the sheer overwhelming magnitude of what she'd just witnessed. Todoroki said nothing. His heterochromatic eyes tracked Izuku's figure below. The crimson hair, the black horns, the blade on his shoulder, the ash drifting around him like gray snow, and something shifted behind his expression. Something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. Bakugo's hands were shaking. He stared at the plaza and didn't blink for 30 seconds. In the observation monitors that were still functioning, 13 replayed the footage in disbelief. Aizawa, battered and bleeding from his own fight against a separate group of villains, leaned against a wall and watched the playback. He saw Izuku cut through 60 villains like they were paper targets. He saw the black flames reduce bodies to nothing. He saw a 15-year-old boy fight with the efficiency and lethality of someone who had been waging war for decades. "What is he?" 13 whispered. Aizawa didn't answer. He didn't have one. But it wasn't over. From the top of the stairway that led to the central plaza, a voice echoed down. Thin, raspy, trembling, but not with fear, with rage. "What kind of hero kills?" Tamura Shigaraki stood at the top of the stairs. His red eyes were wide behind the hand on his face, his fingers dug into his own neck, drawing thin lines of blood. He was staring at the ash-covered plaza with an expression of genuine, uncomprehending fury. Those were his soldiers. His pieces. His army. And one boy, one single horned, red-eyed teenager, had turned them all to dust. Izuku looked up at him. "I'm not playing hero with scum who target my girlfriend," Shigaraki flinched. Then he laughed, high and cracked and ugly. "Nomu," he said. The creature moved. It came from behind Shigaraki like a launched missile. 7 feet of lab-grown muscle and exposed brain tissue, moving at a speed that something that big shouldn't be capable of. It cleared the stairway in one leap and hit the plaza floor hard enough to spider crack the concrete in a 10-meter radius. Then it punched Izuku. The blow was fast. Faster than anything in the villain army had thrown. Faster than Bakugo's gauntlet blast. The fist connected with Izuku's guard. He'd gotten the katana up in time, blade flat, bracing. And the force launched a shockwave that leveled everything within 15 meters. Debris flew. The floor cratered. The wind from the impact knocked Mina off her feet 30 meters away, and she caught herself on a concrete barricade. Izuku slid back. 2 steps. 2 steps back, boots grinding furrows in the concrete. He stopped. He looked at his shoulder where the force had transmitted through the block. Rolled it once. Then he looked at the Nomu. The creature stared back with dead eyes. No intelligence, no malice, just programmed obedience and a body built to destroy. Izuku swung. A clean, horizontal slash, black flames roaring along the blade. The katana bit into the Nomu's arm and the arm came off, severed at the elbow. Black flames consumed the detached limb instantly, reducing it to ash in midair. The stump bubbled, flesh writhed. Muscle regenerated, bone reformed, skin stretched over new tissue. In 3 seconds, the Nomu had a new arm, identical, functional. Izuku watched the process with flat red eyes. "Regeneration," he said. "How annoying." He slashed again, took the other arm, it grew back. He carved a diagonal gash across the Nomu's torso from shoulder to hip. The wound sealed in seconds. He severed a leg, it regrew. He cut the thing in half, both halves reconnected. The class watched in horrified awe. "It just keeps coming back?" And then Kirishima breathed. "That's hyper-regeneration," Yaoyorozu said, eyes wide. "It can heal any wound almost instantaneously." Izuku stepped back from the Nomu. The creature lunged at him again, throwing punches that cracked the air. He wove between them, fluid, unhurried, moving with the kind of grace that shouldn't exist in someone his size, and parried the ones he couldn't dodge. Then he sheathed his katana. The class held its breath. Izuku raised his right hand, palm open, facing the Nomu, and the air changed again. Everyone in the building felt it. Not just those in the plaza. Everyone. The students on the walkways, Aizawa in the corridor, 13 by the entrance. Every last soul inside the USJ facility felt the atmosphere transform. The temperature dropped first, a sudden bone-deep cold like the building had been relocated to the Arctic. Then the pressure hit. A weight that settled on every chest, every shoulder, every pair of lungs in the building. Gravity itself seemed to increase. Breathing became a labor. Above Izuku's open palm, the air caught fire. Black flames, impossibly dense, impossibly concentrated, swirled into existence. Not a torch, not a stream, a sphere. A compression of hellfire so absolute that the air around it warped and bent. The light in the room dimmed. The sphere pulled illumination into itself, distorting everything within 20 meters into a fisheye lens of warped shadow and bleeding color. The concrete beneath Izuku's feet cracked. Then it glowed. Then it began to melt, running in rivulets away from the point of compression. The temperature within 5 meters of his body exceeded anything the facility's sensors were designed to measure. The sensors just died. Shigaraki, still on the stairs, took a step backward. Then another. His red eyes were wide. The hand on his face trembled. What is that?" he whispered. Mina pressed herself against the barricade and watched through the smoke. She'd seen hell flare before, at the entrance exam when Izuku had erased a zero-pointer from existence. But this was different. This was more. She could feel the heat from 30 meters away. She could feel the pressure in her teeth. The Nomu charged, blind obedience. No survival instinct. It ran straight at Izuku with both fists raised. "Hell flare," Izuku said. He released it. The sphere left his palm. It crossed the 5-meter gap between his hand and the Nomu's chest in less time than it took to blink. Blink. The Nomu screamed. It was the first sound the creature had made. A scream. Not human, not animal, something between the two, something that came from a throat that had been designed in a laboratory and had never been intended to produce a sound like that. Pain. Absolute, overwhelming, incomprehensible pain. The black flames hit the Nomu's torso and expanded outward. They didn't just burn, they consumed at a molecular level. The hyper-regeneration activated. Flesh tried to reform, muscle tried to rebuild, bone tried to regrow. But the flames burned faster. For every cell that regenerated, 1,000 more were devoured. The fire ate through the regeneration like acid through tissue paper. It was no contest. The Nomu's body fought itself. Regeneration and consumption, creation and annihilation, locked in a war that lasted exactly 4 seconds. Annihilation won. The black flames consumed the Nomu entirely. From the point of impact outward, the creature came apart, not in chunks, not in pieces, but in ash. The massive, 7-foot, lab-grown abomination that had been designed to kill All Might was reduced to a column of gray particles that hung in the air for one long, suspended moment. Then the wind took it. The heat dissipated. The pressure lifted. The temperature normalized. Where the Nomu had stood, there was nothing. Not a trace. Not a cell. Just a scorch mark on the plaza floor, black and glassy, still faintly smoking. Izuku lowered his hand. He let out a slow breath through his nose. Above, on the walkways, Class 1A stood in total, absolute ringing silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Kirishima was crying. He didn't know why. The tears just came. He was staring at the plaza with his mouth open and his fists clenched and tears running down his hardened cheeks. And all he could say was, That's a real hero." Yayorozu had dropped to her knees. Her legs had given out. She knelt on the metal walkway with her hands in her lap, staring at the scorch mark where the Nomu had been, and her brain, her genius, analytical, encyclopedic brain, could not process what she'd just witnessed. Uraraka was sobbing openly. Ida had his arm around her, but he was shaking too. Kaminari was flat on his back, having passed out from the pressure wave. Sero was sitting against the railing, face buried in his hands. Todoroki stood apart, alone. His heterochromatic eyes burned, left side warm, right side cold. And he stared at Izuku with an expression that had cracked down the middle of itself. He said nothing, but his mind was screaming. Bakugo looked at the ash drifting across the plaza. He looked at Izuku standing in the center of the scorched earth, crimson hair moving in the thermal currents, black horns silhouetted against the smoke. And something inside Katsuki Bakugo. Something that had been built on the foundation of being the strongest, the best, the undeniable apex. Shattered, not his spirit, not his will, his delusion. He was not the strongest person in this building. He was not even close. Shigaraki was still on the stairs. He hadn't moved since the Nomu was consumed. His body was locked. His mind was unraveling. The hand on his face trembled so violently that it nearly fell. His red eyes were wide and glassy and wet. The Nomu was gone. His army was ash. His plan was vapor. And the boy, the horned, red-eyed, crimson-haired boy, was walking toward him. Izuku climbed the stairs, each step deliberate. His katana was back in his hand, black flames licking the blade in lazy spirals. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. Shigaraki tried to move, tried to activate his quirk, tried to do anything, but his body wouldn't obey. The killing intent rolling off the boy climbing toward him was beyond anything he'd ever experienced. Beyond All Might, beyond the stories his master had told him, beyond the nightmares that kept him scratching his own neck bloody at 3 a.m. This was different. This was what it felt like to stand in front of a god and realize you were an insect. Izuku reached the top of the stairs. He circled behind Shigaraki in one fluid motion, a single step that carried him from the front to the back so smoothly that Shigaraki's eyes couldn't track it. The katana came up. The tip pressed against the side of Shigaraki's neck. The black flames were so close that Shigaraki could feel them blistering his skin. The hand on his face cracked from the heat. "Tell your master," Izuku said, voice low, even, devoid of anything resembling mercy. The war god said hello. Shigaraki's lips moved. No sound came out. His body trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. Izuku pulled back. One motion. Clean. Final. The katana sang. What fell didn't reach the floor. The black flames caught it midair and consumed it. Ash. Nothing but ash. Tamura Shigaraki, leader of the League of Villains, ceased to exist in the time between one heartbeat and the next. Kurogiri, the mist villain, had been watching from the back of the plaza. He'd been Shigaraki's handler, his guardian, his failsafe. And he had just watched his charge be unmade by a teenager with a sword. The mist churned. Kurogiri's yellow eyes burned bright. He opened a warp gate, a massive swirl of black and purple, and dove through it. He escaped. Izuku let him go. Not out of mercy, out of purpose. Let him run. Let him carry the message. Let the master, whoever sat at the top of the villain food chain, hear what happened today. Let them understand what was coming for them. The war gods said hello. The heroes arrived 4 minutes later. Aizawa had already been inside, fighting his own battle in the corridors. He emerged battered, bruised, one arm hanging useless, one eye swollen shut. He'd held the line against 30 villains and won because Shota Aizawa was a professional and a survivor and harder to kill than a cockroach in a nuclear bunker. But when he limped to the central plaza and saw what awaited him, he stopped. Ash. Acres of it, covering the entire plaza floor like gray snow, scorch marks in concentric rings, melted concrete, the faint smell of spent fire, and in the center of it, a boy with crimson hair cleaning his katana with the edge of his sleeve. All Might arrived 30 seconds later. In his hero form, towering, golden. He'd sprinted to the USJ the moment the alert reached the school, running at a speed that destroyed the asphalt beneath his feet. He burst through the main entrance expecting carnage, expecting students in danger, expecting the worst. He found peace. Terrible, ash-covered, impossible peace. His eyes swept the plaza. The ash, the scorch marks, the students on the walkways above, alive, unharmed, but shaken to their cores. The absence of any villain presence. The absence of the Nomu he'd been briefed about. The absence of Shigaraki. He looked at Izuku Midoriya. Izuku looked back. Red eyes met blue. The war god and the symbol of peace staring at each other across a field of ash. Young Midoriya, All Might said. What happened here? The League of Villains attacked, Izuku said. I handled it. You handled it. Yes. All Might looked at the plaza again, at the ash, at the scorch mark where the Nomu had been, at the empty stairs where Shigaraki had stood. He understood. For the first time in his career, in decades of being the strongest man alive, the pillar that held up hero society, the symbol that represented everything good and just, Toshinori Yagi looked at a teenager and understood that what stood before him was something the hero world had never accounted for. Not a student, not a prodigy, not a future hero, a force of nature that had already arrived. Mina ran across the plaza. She dodged the worst of the scorch marks, jumped over a pile of ash, and threw herself at Izuku. Her arms went around his neck. Her legs went around his waist. She buried her face in his shoulder and held on like the world was ending and he was the only fixed point in it. He caught her, one arm around her back, the other still holding his katana. He held her against him, pressed his face into her pink hair, and breathed. You're insane, she mumbled into his neck. You knew that when you met me. I did. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her golden eyes were red-rimmed but fierce. I love you. You insane, terrifying, beautiful idiot. I love you too. He kissed her, in the middle of the ash-covered plaza, in front of their classmates, in front of their teachers, in front of the symbol of peace himself. The class erupted, not with words, with noise. Raw, cathartic, overwhelming noise. Kirishima was pounding his fists together and screaming so manly until his voice cracked. Kaminari, having regained consciousness, was whistling. Uraraka was crying, laughing. Ida was doing both simultaneously while insisting they maintain proper decorum, which no one listened to. Sero was filming on his phone. Jiro had her earphone jacks plugged into a wall to listen more carefully because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tsuyu said ribbit with more emotion than she'd ever said anything. In the observation room, the UA faculty reviewed the footage in silence. Principal Nezu finished his tea, set the cup down, steepled his paws. Well, he said, that changes things. Nobody disagreed. The aftermath of the USJ was seismic. Not just for UA, not just for Class 1A, for the entire hero world. A villain attack on the most prestigious hero school in Japan. A league of criminals teleporting directly into a training facility, and one first-year student, one 15-year-old boy, single-handedly dismantling the entire assault force, destroying the bioengineered weapon designed to kill All Might, and eliminating the league's leader. The news broke within hours. Official statements were carefully worded. UA emphasized the heroism of their staff and the courage of their students. They didn't name Izuku specifically. They didn't need to. The footage leaked within 2 days. Security cameras, student phone recordings, fragments of monitor feeds. They spread across social media like the black flames they depicted, consuming everything in their path. Shaky clips of a crimson-haired figure cutting through villains, a compressed sphere of black fire erasing a monster from reality. A katana wreathed in flames, red eyes and smoke, the internet lost its collective mind. Hero forums exploded. News anchors devoted entire segments. Analysis channels broke down every second of available footage frame by frame. Trending hashtags proliferated across every platform. #WarGod, Black Flames, Kijin UA, Who is Red Horn? Pro heroes weighed in. Hawks, the number 3 hero, watching from his penthouse in Tokyo, replayed the Hellflare footage on his tablet 7 times before setting it down and whistling through his teeth. That kid's gonna make the top 10 before he graduates, he said to no one. Endeavor, the number 2 hero, Todoroki's father, watched the footage once. His flame beard burned a foot higher. His office chair melted slightly. He called UA that afternoon and demanded a meeting. Nezu politely declined, and in a bar somewhere in the seedy underbelly of Kamino Ward, a figure in a suit sat behind a wall of television screens and watched the footage of his protege being erased from existence by a boy with horns. All for one, the master of the league, the Shadow Emperor, the oldest villain alive. He watched Shigaraki die. He watched the Nomu burn. He watched the boy walk through his entire organization like it was made of paper. He leaned back. His destroyed face, eyeless, scarred, held together by medical implants and stubborn malice, tilted slightly to the side. Interesting, he said. The doctor beside him trembled. Shall I begin preparations for a stronger Nomu? No. All for one steepled his fingers. I want to learn more about this boy first. There's something odd about him. Something that doesn't belong in this world. The bar was silent. The war god, All for One murmured, testing the words. How dramatic. He smiled. It was not a pleasant thing to witness. 3 weeks after the USJ, UA announced the sports festival would proceed as scheduled. Most schools would have shut down after a villain attack of that magnitude. UA didn't flinch. The announcement was a statement. We are not afraid. We do not hide. Our students are the future of hero society, and the world will see them shine. For Class 1A, the sports festival was more than a competition. It was a stage. The entire nation would be watching. Pro heroes would be scouting. Media coverage would be wall to wall. For any student with ambitions of going pro, this was the moment. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a formality. He said as much to Mina the night before. They were in his dorm room. She was lying on his futon, head in his lap, while he cleaned his katana. The blade gleamed in the lamplight. Outside, the campus was buzzing with nervous energy. Students training, strategizing, forming alliances. You nervous? She asked. No, not even a little. Should I be? She reached up and flicked his nose. Humble, try it sometime. He looked down at her, I'll be humble when someone gives me a reason. She stuck her tongue out at him. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Win this for me? She said. I always do. You always say that. Because it's always true. She grabbed a fistful of his crimson hair and pulled him down for a real kiss. When they broke apart, her cheeks were flushed a deeper pink and his red eyes were warm. Get some sleep, he said. You get some sleep, Mr. Sword Polishing at midnight. The blade needs care. So does your girlfriend. Hold me. He set the katana on its stand, lay down beside her, and wrapped his arms around her. She nestled against his chest, her small horns pressing into his collarbone, her pink fingers tangled in his shirt. Tomorrow, she murmured, already half asleep, show them who you are. They already know. Then remind them. He pressed his lips to the top of her head and closed his eyes. The UA Sports Festival. 60,000 people in the stands. Millions more watching live broadcasts across Japan and 40 other countries. Every pro hero with a television was tuned in. Every hero agency had scouts in the stadium. The first-year students entered the arena from the main tunnel. Class 1A at the front, Class 1B behind them. General studies, support, and business students filling out the ranks. When Izuku Midoriya walked into that stadium, the roar from the crowd spiked by 20 decibels. Everyone knew who he was. The USJ footage had made sure of that. The crimson hair, the black horns, the katana. The boy who burned an army to ash. He walked into the stadium the same way he walked everywhere, like he owned it. Spine straight, stride even, red eyes forward. The katana hung at his hip. The crowd noise crashed against him like a wave against a cliff, and he gave it exactly the same attention. Mina walked beside him, pink skin catching the stadium lights, black eyes sparkling, grinning at the cameras. She waved to the crowd with one hand and held Izuku's hand with the other. In the waiting area behind the tunnel before the first event, Izuku sat on a bench. Mina sat on his lap, in front of cameras, in front of their classmates, in front of every scout and journalist with a telephoto lens. He was braiding a section of her pink hair, thick fingers moving with surprising dexterity while she outlined her strategy for the first event. I'm thinking acid surfing for the ice section, then you'll be fine, he said. I know I'll be fine. I'm amazing, but I want to be spectacular. He tied off the braid. She turned on his lap to face him. Her expression softened. Win, she said. I always do. She rolled her eyes and kissed him on the cheek. The cameras caught it. The broadcasters caught it. Within 30 seconds, the clip was being shared faster than any sports commentary. In the stands, Present Mike's voice boomed, and it looks like the power couple of Class 1A is already making headlines. Midoriya and Ashido, the war god and the acid queen. You love to see it, folks. The crowd went insane. First event, the obstacle race. 4 kilometers, 3 major obstacles, 200 students, 1 track. The starting horn blasted. Students surged forward. Quirks activated in every direction. Ice spread across the ground. Todoroki making his opening play, freezing the first 100 meters to lock everyone in place. It worked on everyone except Izuku. The ice didn't reach him. It tried. The frost crawled toward his feet and then stopped. Melted. The ambient heat radiating from his body, a passive effect of the Kijin, his fire burning just beneath the surface at all times, dissolved the ice in a 2-meter radius around him. He walked forward. The first obstacle, a field of zero-pointer robots. Massive. Multiple units. They blocked the track like a metal barricade. Students scattered. Some went around. Some tried to fight. Most panicked. Izuku drew his katana. Black flames erupted along the blade. He swung, a single horizontal arc, wide and sweeping. The kind of slash that belonged on a battlefield and had no business being at a school athletics event. A crescent wave of black flames launched from the blade and tore through the robot blockade. 3 zero-pointers, 1 slash. The fire ate through their torsos simultaneously, and all 3 collapsed in unison, forward, backward, and to the side, crashing to the ground in eruptions of smoke and ash. The track was clear. Izuku sheathed his blade and kept walking. Behind him, 200 students and 60,000 spectators processed what they'd just seen. Present Mike's commentary devolved into incoherent screaming for approximately 10 seconds before he regained himself. 1 slash. He just cut down 3 zero-pointers with 1 slash. Midoriya is on a different level. He's on a different planet. He's not even running. The second obstacle? The fall. A canyon spanned by tight ropes over a seemingly bottomless pit. Students balanced, crawled, swung, and fell. Izuku jumped a single leap. He cleared the entire canyon, every tightrope, every platform, every gap, and landed on the far side hard enough to crack the concrete. He didn't break stride. The third obstacle, a minefield, buried explosives designed to slow and scatter. Izuku walked through it. The mines detonated against him. The explosions hit his body and accomplished nothing. The force dispersed against his frame like water against a boulder. He didn't flinch. He didn't slow. He walked through a field of exploding munitions with the same energy as walking through a light drizzle. He crossed the finish line. First place, by over 3 minutes. When the second place finisher, Todoroki, who had been sprinting full speed the entire race, crossed the line, Izuku was leaning against a wall with his arms crossed, eyes closed, like he was taking a nap. Todoroki stopped, looked at Izuku, looked at the clock, looked back at Izuku. He said nothing, but something behind his eyes cracked a little wider. In the stands, the audience was in a frenzy. People were on their feet, chanting, screaming, strangers high-fiving each other. The energy was electric. The kind of electric that only comes when a crowd collectively witnesses something they know they'll remember forever. Mina crossed the finish line in 12th place, acid surfing her way through every obstacle with style and speed. She ran straight to Izuku, grabbed his face with both hands, and kissed him in front of 60,000 people and 40 million viewers. He kissed her back. The stadium erupted. Present Mike gave up on professional commentary entirely and just laughed into the microphone for 20 seconds straight. Second event, the cavalry battle. Teams of 4. Each student assigned a point value based on their race finish. The team with the highest combined point total at the end wins. Standard rules, steal headbands, maintain your stack, 12-minute time limit. The catch, first place in the race gets 10 million points, which meant every team's primary target was the same. Izuku Midoriya, his team, himself as the rider, Mina, Kirishima, and Tokoyami, the bird-headed boy whose shadow quirk Shadow Spectre operated independently as both offense and defense. Mina had volunteered first. Kirishima had physically shoved 3 other students out of the way to claim the second spot. Tokoyami had approached Izuku after the race, inclined his head, and said simply, "I want to be on the winning team." Izuku had looked at him, assessed him, and nodded once. "You're in." The cavalry battle began. 17 teams, all of them targeting Izuku's headband stack. The 10 million point bounty on his forehead made him the single most valuable target in the arena. He knew it. He didn't care. 6 teams charged simultaneously. From the left, Todoroki's team, Todoroki as rider with Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari as his horses. A wall of ice surging ahead of them. From the right, Bakugo's team. Bakugo's rider, launched from his horses by explosion power, rocketing toward Izuku's headband like a guided missile. From the front, the back, and both flanks, 4 more teams, all converging. Mina planted her feet and secreted acid across the ground in a wide perimeter. 3 teams hit the acid field and went sliding. Their footing dissolved, their formations collapsed, their riders tumbled. Kirishima hardened his entire body and tanked the head-on charge from a team that tried to bull rush through. He held them like a wall. Tokoyami's Shadow Spectre lashed out, a massive bird-shaped manifestation of black energy that swatted away 2 teams simultaneously, sending riders flying. And Izuku dealt with Todoroki and Bakugo. Bakugo came in screaming. He launched from his team, propelled by dual explosions, fists extended, reaching for the headband. Izuku caught his wrist. Midair, one hand. He held Bakugo suspended above the ground by one arm while the blonde kicked and snarled and sparked. "Too predictable," Izuku said. He released the wrist and pushed. Bakugo flew backward and crashed into his own team, toppling all 4 of them. Todoroki's glacier arrived, a wave of ice 20 feet high rolling across the arena, encasing everything in its path. Izuku didn't even look at it. He raised his free hand, palm facing the glacier, and emitted a pulse of black flames, not a blast, not a sphere, just a wave of heat that rolled forward and met the ice head-on. The ice didn't melt, it evaporated instantly. A 20-foot wall of ice turned to steam in under a second, and the steam cloud that bloomed across the arena blinded every team in a 100-meter radius. When the steam cleared, Izuku was exactly where he'd been, all headbands still on his arm. His team was intact. Everyone else was in varying states of disarray. 12 minutes passed, the buzzer sounded. Izuku's team finished first. With their original 10 million point headband, plus 5 more stolen from teams that had gotten too close. Mina was cheering. Kirishima was flexing. Tokoyami's Shadow Spectre was doing a small, satisfied loop in the air. Izuku sat on Kirishima's shoulders and looked across the arena at the wreckage of 17 teams' ambitions. Moving on, he said, the tournament. Single elimination. 1-on-1. The bracket was set, 16 students. The path to the finals ran through increasingly dangerous opponents. Izuku's bracket put him against a series of opponents who, on paper, should have provided some challenge. In practice, they provided content. His first match was against Ibara Shiozaki, the vine-haired girl from Class 1B. She was devout, powerful, and extremely skilled with her vine manipulation. She sent a forest of thorny vines across the arena, thick enough to trap a truck. Izuku walked through them. The black flames that radiated from his body incinerated every vine that came within arm's reach. He walked through the entire attack like it was a hedge maze, crossed the arena, and placed his hand on her shoulder. Out of bounds, Midnight announced. She pointed. Izuku's other hand had guided Shiozaki backward over the white line while she was focused on the vines. Match time, 47 seconds. His second match was against Tetsu, the steel-skinned boy from 1B who was essentially a metal version of Kirishima. He charged headlong, fully armored in gleaming steel. Izuku didn't draw his katana. He met the charge with a straight right. His fist, coated in black flames, hit Tetsu's steel chest. The steel glowed cherry red on impact, then white. Then the flames ate through it entirely, and Tetsu felt something he'd never felt while armored: pain. He staggered. Izuku grabbed his arm, pivoted, and threw him clear across the arena. He hit the far wall and left a Tetsu-shaped dent in the concrete. Match time, 23 seconds. His semifinal was against Tokoyami, his own cavalry battle teammate. Tokoyami knew what was coming. Shadow Spectre knew what was coming. They'd seen Izuku fight up close. They knew the power, the speed, the fire. They fought anyway, because that's what heroes do. Tokoyami unleashed Shadow Spectre at full power. The manifestation swelled to enormous size, a bird-shaped Goliath of living shadow that filled half the arena. It lunged at Izuku with talons the size of cars. Izuku raised his left hand. A wall of black flames erupted from the ground, rising 10 meters, burning with such intensity that the shadow, a creature literally made of absence and void, recoiled. Shadow Spectre was strong in the absence of light, but black flames weren't light. They were something else entirely, something that burned even in the spaces between illumination. Shadow Spectre screamed, a high, keening sound, and shrank, retreated into Tokoyami's cloak. Tokoyami fell to one knee, gasping, his quirk forcibly suppressed by the sheer oppressive power of the flames. "You fought well," Izuku said. He meant it. Match time, 51 seconds. The finals, Izuku Midoriya versus Shoto Todoroki. The arena was packed, every seat filled. Standing room only, people crowded the corridors, the concourses, the stairs. Outside, screens broadcast the match to thousands more who couldn't get in. The commentators had given up any pretense of impartiality. This was the match everyone had been waiting for. The war god versus the son of endeavor. Black flames against ice and fire. The unstoppable force against the immovable legacy. In the stands, Endeavor sat rigid. His flame beard burned high. His eyes were locked on the arena. All Might stood at the back of the faculty section, arms crossed. Expression unreadable. Aizawa sat in the commentary booth beside Present Mic and didn't blink. Mina was in the front row of the student section. She had her hands on the railing. Kirishima was beside her, fists clenched. Kaminari was practically vibrating. The entire student body was leaning forward. Izuku walked into the arena from the east entrance, crimson hair catching the afternoon sun, black horns gleaming, katana on his hip, red eyes fixed forward. He moved to the center of the ring and stopped. Todoroki entered from the west. White and red hair split down the middle. Heterochromatic eyes, gray on the right, turquoise on the left, his right side already frosting over, cold air rising from his skin like smoke in reverse. They stood facing each other. 10 meters apart, the crowd noise faded to a hum. Midnight raised her arm. Finals match. Izuku Midoriya versus Shoto Todoroki. Begin. Todoroki moved first. His right foot stamped the ground and the arena erupted. A glacier, not an ice wall, not a frozen patch. A glacier. A wave of ice 50 feet high sweeping across the ring in a tidal surge, covering everything, the floor, the barriers, the air itself, crystallizing with the sheer volume of frozen water being generated. It was the biggest ice attack Todoroki had ever produced. An arena-swallowing, daylight-blocking, absolutely massive commitment of power intended to end the fight in one move. It hit Izuku like a frozen tsunami. The ice covered him, encased him, buried him under 50 feet of frozen mass. The arena was now a miniature ice mountain. The crowd gasped. Midnight squinted through the frost. 1 second, 2 seconds. The ice began to glow. From inside the glacier, deep inside, from the exact center, a red-orange glow spread outward. Then the glow turned black. The ice began to sublimate. Not melt, sublimate. Solid to gas, bypassing liquid entirely. Steam erupted from every crack, every fissure, every surface. The glacier moaned. It cracked. It shrieked. Then it evaporated. 50 feet of ice. Gone. In 4 seconds. Reduced to a blanket of steam that rolled across the arena and into the stands. Warm and heavy and smelling of ozone and fire. And there stood Izuku. Exactly where he'd been. Hands in his pockets. Not a drop of water on him. Black flames dancing along his shoulders and arms, licking up through his crimson hair, wreathing his black horns in fire. He looked at Todoroki through the thinning steam. "You whine about your father's fire, Todoroki," he said, his voice carried across the silent arena. "Your flames are yours, but even if you use them, they are nothing compared to mine." That landed. In the stands, Endeavor leaned forward so hard his seat groaned. Todoroki's left eye twitched. His jaw tightened. His left side, the fire side, his father's side, the side he'd sworn never to use, sparked. Then it burned. Fire erupted from the left half of Todoroki's body. Huge, roaring, unconstrained. The flames poured across the ring like a tidal wave, mixing with the lingering steam to create a hellish landscape of fire and fog. It was the full extent of his flame power, unleashed for the first time in a combat setting, driven not by his father's expectations, but by the raw, burning need to prove that he could stand on the same stage as the boy in front of him. The fire hit Izuku, and Izuku grinned. For the first time in the entire tournament, the first genuine, visible, teeth-showing grin on Izuku Midoriya's face. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a warrior who had finally found something worth acknowledging. He drew his katana. The blade cleared the sheath, and the black flames surged, not just along the steel, but outward, expanding, filling the space around Izuku in a sphere of pitch-black fire that met Todoroki's flames head-on. The two fires collided in the center of the arena, red and orange against pitch black. Todoroki's flames were massive, powerful, genuinely impressive, the product of the number 2 hero's genetics and a lifetime of suppressed potential finally unleashed. Izuku's flames ate them. The black flames didn't overpower Todoroki's fire. They consumed it, absorbed it, fed on it. Todoroki's flames were fuel. They poured into the black flames, and the black flames grew, swelling, expanding, the black fire literally taking Todoroki's power and adding it to its own. "What?" Todoroki breathed. Izuku swung. Black flame slash. The katana carved a horizontal arc through the air, and the accumulated power, his flames plus Todoroki's, combined into a single devastating wave, launched across the arena in a crescent of black fire 20 meters wide. The shockwave was staggering. It didn't just blow Todoroki out of bounds, it erased the arena behind him. The crescent hit the barrier wall, reinforced concrete 2 meters thick, designed to withstand the impact of professional-grade quirks, and punched through it. The wall crumbled. The crescent continued into the stands behind it. Empty, thank God, evacuated as standard procedure for the finals. And carved a 50-meter trench in the concrete seating before finally dissipating. Todoroki hit the barrier wall, what remained of it, with enough force to crater the concrete. He slid down it slowly. His ice side was steaming. His fire side was out. His eyes were wide and unfocused. He was conscious, but only just. The arena was destroyed. Half the floor was molten. The barrier wall had a gap in it the size of a truck. The concrete seating beyond was carved open like a wound. Smoke and steam and ash filled the air. And Izuku Midoriya stood in the center of what was left, katana still extended from the follow-through of his swing. Black flames guttering along the blade. Silence. 3 seconds of absolute, complete, deafening silence. 60,000 people. 40 million viewers. Every pro hero in the stands. Every commentator in the booth. Every student in the seats. Silent. Then the stadium exploded, not with an attack, with sound, with noise, with the raw, uncontrollable, hysterical eruption of a crowd that has just witnessed something that will be replayed on every screen in the world for the next decade. People were on their feet, people were screaming, people were hugging strangers, people were crying. The noise hit like a physical wall, a tsunami of human reaction that crashed against the arena and kept going. Present Mike's microphone was distorting from the volume of his own screaming. Midoriya, black flame slash. He absorbed Todoroki's fire. He used it against him. The arena is destroyed. The wall is gone. Todoroki is down. What did we just witness? Aizawa, beside him, pulled his capture scarf tighter around his neck and said nothing. But his eyes were very, very wide. In the faculty section, All Might had risen from his seat. His fists were clenched at his sides. His expression was something between awe and revelation. He looked at the molten crater that used to be an arena, and he looked at the boy standing in the middle of it, and he understood that the era he'd built was ending. Not in tragedy, not in defeat, in evolution. Something greater had arrived. In the stands, Endeavor sat frozen. His flames had gone out. For the first time in recent memory, the Flame Hero's fire had extinguished itself entirely. He stared at the arena with an expression that was equal parts fury, terror, and grudging, unwilling awe. His son's flames, the flames he'd spent 2 decades cultivating, breeding, engineering, had been swallowed whole by a first-year student. Midnight fanned herself with her clipboard. Winner, Izuku Midoriya. But the announcement was redundant. Everyone already knew. In the student section, Mina was on her feet. She was screaming his name, not cheering. Screaming, raw and proud and electric, her voice cutting through the noise of 60,000 people like a blade through cloth. Kirishima was beside her, both arms in the air, tears streaming down his hardened cheeks. Kaminari had short-circuited, literally tiny sparks shooting from his hair, eyes blank, a stupid grin on his face. The entire student section was in chaos. Izuku sheathed his katana. He turned. He looked up at the stands. 60,000 faces, millions of invisible viewers. He found her. In the crowd, in the noise, in the madness, he found Mina's face. Golden eyes on pink skin, mouth open in mid-scream, both fists raised. He gave her a slow nod. She screamed louder. He smirked. The undisputed champion of UA's sports festival. First place. Every round. Every event. Every single match won with the kind of absolute dominance that people would be analyzing, discussing, debating, and replaying for years to come. He didn't just win the tournament, he ended it. The medal ceremony was a formality. Izuku stood on the top podium. Gold medal. Todoroki on second, ice pack on his shoulder, expression thoughtful, something fundamentally changed behind his eyes. Tokoyami on third, silent, respectful, Shadow Spectre perched on his shoulder like a proud, feathered guardian. All Might presented the medals. When he placed the gold around Izuku's neck, their eyes met again. Young Midoriya, All Might said, voice low enough that only Izuku could hear. You carry something very special in you, something I've never seen before. I know, Izuku said. The world is going to come for you. Villains, governments, people who fear what they don't understand. Let them come. All Might looked at him for a long moment, then he smiled. Not the public smile. The 100-watt, camera-ready, merchandise-worthy smile. A real one. Small, tired, genuine. I think, All Might said, that the future is in good hands. Izuku said nothing to that. He just looked out at the stadium, at the crowd still on their feet, at the cameras still rolling, at the pro heroes still staring, at Mina in the stands with her arm around Kirishima's shoulder, both of them beaming. He thought about his mother, watching at home. Crying, probably. She always cried. He thought about the old man who forged his katana, about the playground he'd burned at age 3, about the girl with pink skin crying behind a gymnasium. He thought about what he was, what he carried, the power that burned in his blood like a furnace that never went cold, the instincts that moved his blade before his brain could catch up, the presence that filled rooms and emptied them, the fire that consumed all other fire, the war god's inheritance, not a memory, not a personality, but a legacy written in flesh and flame. He thought about what was coming, the villains who would rise, the threats that would escalate, the shadows that were already moving in the spaces between the light. He could feel them, the way a wolf feels a storm before the sky changes. They would come. They always came. and he would be ready. He would be standing. He would be burning, not for glory, not for fame. Not for the crowd or the cameras or the metal around his neck, for her, for the people beside him, for the ones who looked at his horns and his red eyes and his black flames and didn't flinch, for the pink-skinned girl who told him he wasn't scary and meant it, for the mother who loved him despite the fire, for the friends who followed him despite the danger. Izuku Midoriya was born different. He was born with the soul of a war god in the body of a boy. He was born with fire that burned beyond the reach of anything the world had ever known. And he swore, to himself, to the sky, to whatever force had placed this power in his blood, that he would use every last ember of it to protect the people he loved. He kept his promises, always. That night, after the stadium emptied and the cameras shut off and the world settled into the buzzing electric aftermath of what it witnessed, Izuku Midoriya sat on the roof of the U dormitory with Mina Ashido curled against his side. His katana lay across his lap. The gold medal hung around her neck. She'd stolen it during the walk back, claiming winners' privileges extended to winners' girlfriends. The city glowed below them, stars above, spring wind in their hair. "Hey," she said, "hey. You know the whole country watched you today, right? I'm aware. And you know every hero agency in Japan is going to be fighting over you. Probably. And you know you're trending #1 worldwide on every platform that exists. I don't care." She tilted her head up to look at him. "What do you care about?" He looked down at her. Red eyes, warm. The fire in them wasn't the burning kind. It was the keeping warm kind. The kind that makes you feel safe. "You," he said. "The people I love. Everything else is just noise." She pressed closer to him. "You're the cheesiest war god ever. And you love it. I really, really do." He wrapped his arm tighter around her. She laced her fingers through his. Their horns, his black, hers small and pink, caught the starlight. "Izuku?" "Yeah. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll always come back, no matter what happens. No matter what they throw at you. You come back to me." He was silent for a moment. The wind moved through his crimson hair. His red eyes reflected the city lights. "I swore to protect the people I love," he said. "I keep my promises." She believed him. And the next morning, when the sun broke through the dormitory windows, and Izuku opened his eyes at exactly 4:47 a.m. the way he always did, he found Mina still curled against him, her pink fingers wrapped around the fabric of his shirt like she was holding a receipt she refused to lose. Her breathing was slow, steady. Her small horns pressed against his collarbone. One leg was thrown over his, and her acid had eaten a small hole in the corner of his pillowcase during the night, which was a thing that happened when she slept too deeply. He didn't move. He lay there for 6 minutes and let her sleep. When she stirred, it was with the grace of a cat falling off a shelf. She blinked. She squinted. She said, "What time is it?" "Early." "Then why are you awake?" "Because I'm always awake." She buried her face back into his chest. "Unacceptable. Sleep more. For me." He didn't sleep more, but he stayed. The sports festival was 3 days old. The world had moved on from the event itself and into the aftermath, which was louder, messier, and vastly more annoying than the tournament had been. Izuku's phone had been vibrating non-stop since the medal ceremony. He'd turned it off after the 47th message. Mina had read some of them aloud. Agency offers, media interview requests, endorsement deals, a formal letter from the Ministry of Defense that she'd laughed at so hard she'd cried. The internship offers were something else entirely. They arrived through UA's official channels. Stacked. Dozens of them. Every major hero agency in Japan wanted Izuku Midoriya for their internship week, and the language they used ranged from professional to desperate. Aizawa distributed them during homeroom the following Monday. He dropped a stack on Izuku's desk that was thicker than the stacks for the rest of the class, combined. He said nothing about it. His expression said everything. Izuku went through them that evening in the common room. Mina was draped across the couch beside him, painting her toenails acid green, a color she achieved by literally using a diluted version of her quirk, which Kirishima had once called the most terrifying pedicure in human history. Hawks had sent a request, handwritten. The letterhead was expensive. The message was not, "Hey, Redhorn kid, let's work. I'll teach you how to look good on camera. You clearly need it." Below this, a phone number and a tiny doodle of a bird giving a thumbs up. Mirko's was blunt. You fight like you mean it. That's rare. Come train with me and I'll make you faster. Gang Orca's was formal and respectful. Best Genists was politely worded and absolutely not relevant to anything Izuku cared about. And then there was Endeavors. It wasn't a letter. It was a summons. The language read like a man who had never been told no in his professional life and was not about to start accommodating the concept. It said, essentially, report to my agency at 0800 on Monday. The tone implied that failure to appear would be noted. Izuku folded it into a paper airplane and threw it across the common room. It hit Bakugo in the back of the head. Bakugo turned around, palms sparking, saw who'd thrown it, and said nothing. He turned back to his textbook. The room noticed. The room said nothing. Progress. So who are you picking? Mina asked, blowing on her toes. Gran Torino. She looked up. The old retired guy who trained All Might? Yes. Why? Because he survived things that should have ended him. That kind of experience doesn't come from a gym. She studied his face. He was looking at Torino's file on his phone, a thin dossier, mostly redacted, with a photograph of a tiny old man in a yellow cape who looked like a stiff wind would knock him over. You want someone who can actually teach you something, she said. I want someone who knows what waiting feels like. She tilted her head. Her golden eyes caught the lamplight. You don't wait, Izuku. You walk through things. I know, that's why I need to learn. She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned over and kissed his cheek. You're gonna scare that poor old man to death. He trained All Might. He'll manage. And me? She grinned. I'm going to Mirko. He looked at her. Something in his red eyes shifted. Not concern, exactly. Recognition. The rabbit hero was relentless, violent, and fought with a ferocity that would push Mina harder than she'd ever been pushed. Good, he said. She'll make you stronger. I'm already strong. Stronger then. She flicked his ear. Smooth. The internship assignments were posted. The class scattered to their placements. And for the first time since they were 12 years old, Izuku and Mina were separated for an extended stretch. The platform at Musutafu Station. Morning. The train to Mina's placement left 12 minutes before his. She stood in front of him with her duffel bag over one shoulder and her hero costume case in the other hand. Her pink hair was pulled back in the braid he'd done for her that morning. Her uniform was crisp. Her eyes were bright. He cupped her face with both hands. She grabbed his collar. The kiss was long. Kirishima, standing 6 meters away with his own luggage, made a heroic attempt to look at literally anything else and failed on every level. Kaminari didn't even try. He took a photo. Sero gave him a thumbs up. When they broke apart, her cheeks were flushed a deeper pink than her skin. Come back in one piece, she said. Always. And come back better than you left. He smiled, the real one. The one that made the sharp lines of his face soften and his red eyes go warm. She hit his shoulder. He caught her hand. He raised it to his mouth and pressed his lips against her knuckles. Slowly. With the kind of gentleness that made people forget he'd turned an arena into a crater 3 days ago, she went pink. Fully, deeply, completely pink. Even her ears. Izuku. Just, she whispered. The entire platform is watching. Good. She laughed, bright and loud and full. Then her train announced boarding, and she grabbed her bags, and she walked away with the energy of someone who owned every room they entered. She looked back once. He was still standing there. She waved. He gave her the slow nod. She turned back to the train and boarded and was gone. Kirishima walked up beside him. Dude, he said, you guys are going to make everyone in this school die of jealousy. Izuku picked up his bag. That's not my problem. Gran Torino lived in a building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the previous century. Small. Cluttered. The smell of taiyaki and old fabric. Izuku ducked through the door frame. His horns nearly caught the lintel, and set his bag down in the entryway. Something moved. Izuku caught the kick 1 inch from his temple. His left hand closed around the ankle of a small, ancient man in a yellow cape who had launched himself from behind the refrigerator at approximately 60 kilometers per hour. Gran Torino hung upside down in Izuku's grip, dangling by one ankle. His white hair hung toward the floor. His eyes, small, sharp, and carrying the specific kind of energy that only came from decades of almost dying, stared up at Izuku's face. 3 seconds of silence. Then the old man started laughing. It was a big laugh, bigger than his body. The kind of laugh that came from the belly and shook the walls and filled the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "You'll do," Gran Torino said. "Put me down, kid." Izuku set him on his feet. Torino straightened his cape, adjusted his belt, and looked Izuku up and down with the expression of someone appraising a blade. "Saw the sports festival," Torino said. "You fight like a man who's done it before. In a different life, maybe." Izuku said nothing. "I trained Toshinori," Torino continued. "He was strong, stubborn, had the kind of heart that made you want to protect the world just so it'd have a place for him in it. But he was always moving forward, always hitting harder, always bigger." He paused. "You remind me of someone else." "Who?" The training that followed was unlike anything Izuku had experienced. Gran Torino didn't try to make him stronger, didn't try to increase his output or refine his technique. He didn't care about the black flames. He didn't care about Hellflare. He didn't care about the katana. He cared about the pause, the space between recognizing a threat and responding to it, the gap, the breath, the single heartbeat, where a fighter decides, not reacts, decides what happens next. "You're too fast," Torino said on the second day after Izuku had demolished a training dummy in a quarter of a second. "Not your body, your mind. You're answering before the question is finished." That's instinct. Instinct is a leash. It pulls you forward before you've seen the whole picture. A warrior fights with instinct. A general fights with intent. Izuku looked at him. Really looked. The old man was barely 4 feet tall. He wheezed when he climbed stairs. His hero days were so far behind him that most people alive didn't know he'd had any. But his eyes. His eyes were the eyes of someone who had stood on more battlefields than he had years, and who had survived every single one of them, not because he was the strongest thing on the field, but because he knew when to stop moving. On the 4th day, Torino attacked him again. Not a test this time. A lesson. The old man was fast, genuinely, frighteningly fast. His quirk, Jet, propelled him off surfaces like a living pinball, changing direction faster than the eye could track. He bounced off walls, off the ceiling, off the floor, off Izuku's own guard, and each bounce carried a strike that arrived from a different angle. Izuku blocked, deflected, countered. He was faster than Torino, stronger. His reflexes were superior in every measurable way. He couldn't tag the old man, not because Torino was too quick, because Torino was fighting in the pause, the space Izuku kept skipping over. Every time Izuku committed to a counter, Torino had already changed trajectory because he'd 1 beat longer before acting. He let Izuku's instinct overcommit, then exploited the gap. It was the most frustrating hour of Izuku's life. When it was over, he sat on the floor of Torino's living room, breathing evenly, katana across his knees, and looked at the old man sitting in his armchair eating a taiyaki. "How?" Izuku said. "Wait longer. See more. Choose better. That sounds like fortune cookie wisdom. It sounds like a man who outlived everyone stronger than him." Torino took another bite. "Your fire burns everything. Great. What happens when you face something that doesn't burn? What happens when the answer isn't more flame?" Izuku was quiet. "You learn to listen to the pause," Torino said. "The moment before the fight tells you everything you need to know about the fight. Read it, sit in it, let the other person show you who they are before you show them who you are." On the 7th day, something shifted. Torino attacked again. The same bouncing, redirecting, impossible to pin down assault. Izuku stood still. He didn't block, didn't counter. He stood in the center of the room with his arms at his sides and his red eyes tracking the old man as he ricocheted off every surface. He tracked the rhythm, the pattern, the almost imperceptible moment between each bounce where Torino's body weight committed to the next direction. There, he moved. 1 step. His hand closed around Torino's cape mid-flight. He stopped the old man's momentum dead, pivoted, and held him aloft by the fabric like a caught bird. Torino blinked. Then he grinned. A wide, gap-toothed grin that made his whole face crinkle. "There it is," he said. "Now you're fighting like a person instead of a natural disaster." Izuku set him down. Torino straightened his cape again and looked at the boy with something that might have been pride or recognition or the specific kind of respect that only one veteran fighter could give another. "You're ready," Torino said. "For what?" "For whatever comes next." What came next was Stain. The hero killer had been carving through Hosu for weeks. 3 pro heroes hospitalized, 1 dead. The pattern was unmistakable. He targeted heroes he deemed unworthy, fame chasers and endorsement hounds who wore the title without earning it, and he left them broken or finished in alleyways and backstreets, a message no one could misread. His ideology was spreading, not through recruitment, through resonance. The underground quoted him, message boards debated him, students whispered about him in hallways, and Izuku Midoriya, sitting on Torino's roof 2 nights before Hosu burned, told Mina the thing he hadn't told anyone else. She was on the phone. Her voice was warm and tired. Mirko's training was brutal, she'd said. The rabbit hero didn't believe in breaks or mercy or the concept of enough cardio. But she was thriving. Izuku could hear it in her tone. The edge she was developing. The steel forming under the brightness. Stain's ideology, Izuku said. The phone was on speaker. The city hummed below him. The core of it, not the killing. The idea that the hero system is full of frauds. Yeah? He's not wrong. Silence on the line. Not uncomfortable. Listening. Half the top 50 care more about brand deals than civilians, Izuku said. They pose for cameras while people bleed out of frame. They build agencies like corporations and call the revenue hero work. It's a performance. Stain sees through it. And, Mina said, and that doesn't make him right. Seeing the disease doesn't make the cure valid. What makes it invalid? He paused, considered. The people he leaves bleeding in those alleys are still people. Even the frauds. You don't kill your way to a better system. You replace it by being the real thing. Mina was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had the tone she only used with him. The one that was soft without being gentle, honest without being harsh. You see through the fraud, Izuku. That doesn't make you him. It means you're the real thing. He looked at the city, the lights, the people moving through the streets below, trusting that heroes would keep them safe.
Yeah,
he said. Now go to sleep. I don't sleep at this hour. Try. For me. Fine. He didn't sleep, but he set the phone on his chest and listened to her breathing until she drifted off on her end, and the sound of it was enough to settle something inside him that the conversation had stirred. 2 nights later, Hosu burned. Nomu, winged, mass-produced, weaker than the original but numerous, descended on the city in a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the local hero response bonds. In minutes, buildings caught fire. Streets cracked. The night sky was filled with the shapes of things that shouldn't exist. Torino's training route overlapped with the Hosu district. They were on a bullet train when the first Nomu hit the railcar, and Izuku was through the torn metal wall before the other passengers had finished screaming. He cut the Nomu down with a single horizontal slash, black flames consuming the body before it hit the tracks, and then he saw the smoke rising from the city center. Torino was beside him, airborne on his jet quirk. Go, the old man said. I'll handle the evac routes. Izuku went. He moved through Hosu like a crimson streak, burning through 2 more Nomu on the way, one that had pinned a fire crew under rubble, another that was scanning a hospital building. Each one took a single strike. Each one became ash. He didn't stop. He heard the fighting from 3 blocks away. An alley. Narrow. Fire escapes overhead. The stink of blood and concrete dust. Tenya Ida was on the ground. His armor was cracked. His left arm was pinned under him at an angle that looked wrong. Blood ran from a cut above his eye and pooled in the gutters. He was trying to stand. His engine sputtered. He couldn't. Standing over him, blade drawn, was a man wrapped in bandages and armor, with a red scarf and eyes that burned with something beyond conviction. Something religious. Stain. The hero killer had his boot on Ida's back. His blade was raised. The killing stroke was loaded. And behind them, slumped against the alley wall, was a pro-hero, native, unconscious, bleeding from multiple wounds, alive only because Stain hadn't finished him yet. Izuku walked into the alley. His footsteps echoed. The flames from the burning city cast moving shadows across the walls. His crimson hair caught the firelight. His black horns rose above his silhouette. The katana hung at his hip. He did not draw it. Not yet. Stain heard him, felt him, turned. The hero killer's eyes, sharp, assessing, predatory, locked onto Izuku's face, onto the horns, the red eyes, the posture, the complete absence of fear. Stain read people the way Izuku read battlefields, and what he read in the boy standing at the mouth of the alley made him lower his blade by 2 inches. Recognition. You, Stain said. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "The war god. I've been watching you." Izuku didn't respond to that. His red eyes flicked to Ida on the ground, to the blood, to the raised weapon. "Get off him," Izuku said. Stain's lips pulled back. Not a smile. Something sharper. This one came looking for revenge. His brother fell to my blade, and he charged in blind, full of rage, no strategy, no purpose. He's exactly the kind of hero who makes the system rot. "I didn't ask for your critique. I told you to get off him." Stain studied Izuku for a long, loaded moment. The fire reflected in his eyes. The blade in his hand was steady. His body language said everything about who he was. A man who had killed before and would again, who did not fear death because he had long since traded the fear of dying for the certainty of purpose. "You're different from the others," Stain said. "You carry real conviction. I can see it." His voice dropped. Something almost like reverence entered it. "Stand aside. This one doesn't deserve what you're offering him." Izuku's expression didn't change. "Ida is mine to protect," he said. "Whether I agree with you or not is irrelevant. You are in my way." He drew the katana. Stain moved first. The hero killer was fast. Genuinely, viciously fast. His blade work was masterful. Years of self-taught refinement, each technique honed through hundreds of real fights against real opponents. He closed the distance in a single lunge, his sword leading, angled to draw blood from Izuku's forearm, because that was the play. Blood Curdle needed a taste, just a lick of blood on his tongue, and his target would freeze. Izuku deflected the lunge with the flat of his katana. Steel rang against steel. Stain redirected instantly. A whip-like reversal that turned the deflected lunge into a low slash at Izuku's legs. Izuku stepped over it. Stain reversed again, drawing a knife from his belt with his left hand and stabbing upward in the same motion. Izuku caught the knife hand. Bare. His fingers wrapped around Stain's wrist and held it. The knife point stopped 3 inches from his throat. They locked eyes, close enough to feel each other's breathing. Close enough that the heat coming off Izuku's body made Stain's bandages smolder at the edges. "You're good," Izuku said. "I've been doing this a long time. I know. That's why I'm not going to drag this out." 3 moves. First, Izuku twisted Stain's knife hand outward, the wrist hyperextended. The knife dropped. He kicked it down the alley and it skittered into the gutter. Second, he stepped inside Stain's sword range, the dead zone where a long blade becomes a liability, and drove the pommel of his katana into the hero killer's solar plexus. The impact folded Stain forward and killed every breath in his lungs. Third, he grabbed Stain by the scarf, spun him, and drove the tip of the katana through the collar of his armored coat, pinning him to the alley wall. The blade sank 3 inches into the brick. Stain hung there, suspended, feet barely touching the ground. Black flames crawled up the wall around the embedded blade. They traced the brick in veins of burning pitch, spreading outward from the point of contact, framing Stain in a cage of fire that would consume him if he moved an inch in any direction. Stain stared at the flames, at their color, at their heat. Then he stared at Izuku's face. And then, impossible, insane, completely and utterly Stain, he smiled. "You're what a hero should be," Stain said. His voice was wrecked from the pommel strike, but the words were clear and they carried weight, whether you like that word or not. Izuku looked at him for a long, unreadable moment. The fire popped and hissed against the brick. "Shut up and stay pinned." He turned away, walked to Ida, knelt down. Ida was conscious, barely. His eyes were wet, from pain, from shame, from the raw and overwhelming experience of watching someone save his life without a speech, without a pose, without a single moment of performance. "Can you stand?" Izuku asked. Yes, I think." A shriek from above cut the air. The winged Nomu came from the rooftop. It had been circling, drawn by the sounds of the fight, and it dove into the alley mouth like a falling boulder. 600 pounds of lab-grown muscle and teeth aimed straight at the clustered bodies below. Izuku didn't look up. He drew his katana from the wall. Stain slid to the ground, pinned by the flames, and swung it upward in a single rising arc without turning around. The black flames launched. The crescent caught the Nomu mid-dive and split it from sternum to spine. Both halves burned to ash before they touched the ground. Gray flakes drifted down like snow. Izuku sheathed his blade. He looked at Ida. "Get up." Ida got up. The heroes arrived within minutes. Polite. Police, ambulances, pro-heroes who had been fighting Nomu across the city and converging on the alley based on reports. They found Stain pinned to the wall by fading black flames. They found Native unconscious but stable. They found Ida standing with his weight on one leg and his pride in ruins. And they found Izuku Midoriya walking out of the alley, katana on his shoulder, ash in his crimson hair. He didn't stop for the cameras. He didn't look at them. He walked past the flashing lights and the shouted questions and the reaching microphones as if none of it existed. The footage circulated by morning, a grainy phone recording from someone on a fire escape above the alley. You could see the exchange, the deflection, the pin, the flare of black fire, the Nomu cut from the sky without a backward glance. A new clip for the archive. Hawks watched it 17 times. His wings twitched with each viewing. He sent a second internship request to UA that afternoon. This one was handwritten on a napkin and hand-delivered by a feather that flew through the mail slot of the principal's office. It read, "When you're done with the old man." Nezu pinned it to his corkboard and said nothing. The internship week ended. The students returned to UA carrying new skills, new bruises, and new understanding of what the hero world actually looked like outside the academy walls. Mina came back harder, leaner. She moved differently. Mirko had reshaped her footwork, her timing, her instinct for closing distance. Her acid output had increased by 30%. She had a bruise on her ribs from a sparring match she'd won and a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was waiting at the station when Izuku's train pulled in. The moment he stepped onto the platform, she launched herself at him. Full body, arms around his neck, legs around his waist. The impact rocked him back half a step, which, for someone who had once tanked a Nomu's punch, was a compliment. "Missed you," she said into his neck. 9 days. 9 eternities. Don't ever leave again. I'll try. She pulled back, looked at his face, searched it for new lines, new weight, new anything. "You learned something," she said. "I learned how to wait." She blinked. "You? Wait?" "I know," she grinned. "The world isn't ready for a patient Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't ready for the impatient one either." She kissed him on the platform. Kirishima, who had arrived on the same train, walked past them, gave a thumbs up to no one in particular, and kept walking with the satisfied expression of a man who had seen something beautiful and refused to interrupt it. 3 weeks later, Class 1A loaded onto buses, headed for the Pussycats, training camp in the Beast's Forest. The forest was enormous. Ancient trees, thick canopy. The air smelled like pine and old rain. The wild pussycats, Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, and Tiger, greeted the students at the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley filled with earth creature constructs and told them they had 3 hours to reach the base camp at the bottom. Then Pixie Bob sent a wave of living earth at them that knocked half the class off the cliff. 3 hours later, the students dragged themselves into base camp, bruised, exhausted, and covered in dirt. All except 2. Izuku and Mina arrived first. By 90 minutes, he had burned a path through the earth creatures. She had acid surfed the terrain. They reached the base camp, set down their bags, and were cooking rice over a campfire by the time the next group staggered in. Mandalay watched from the tree line. Her expression was unreadable. She'd been briefed on Izuku, the USJ, the sports festival, the hero killer incident. She'd read the files, she'd watched the footage. She thought she was prepared. She wasn't. The training was designed to push quirk limits through sustained exertion. Each student had a personalized regimen. Bakugo plunged his hands into boiling water to expand his sweat glands. Todoroki alternated ice walls and fire blasts until his body temperature regulation broke down and rebuilt itself stronger. Kirishima took hits until his hardening thickened. Izuku's regimen concerned the Pussycats. He ran the camp perimeter at speeds that left after images in the tree line. He practiced compression, holding the Hellflare sphere above his palm for minutes at a time, pushing the density higher, the containment tighter, turning the air around his hand into a zone where normal physics gave up and went home. The trees closest to his training area died from heat exposure. Their leaves didn't fall, they sublimated. He slept 3 hours a night, woke before anyone, sat at the forest edge with his katana across his knees and watched the tree line with the flat attention of someone expecting an attack that the rest of the camp thought was impossible. On the third night, Mina found him there. She sat beside him, didn't speak, just leaned her head against his shoulder and watched the trees with him. After 10 minutes, she said, "You feel it?" "Yeah." "Something's coming." "Yes." "When?" "Soon." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. Her acid had been pushed so hard during the day that her palms were dry for the first time in months. He held her hand, and the warmth from his body, the constant, furnace-deep warmth of the Kijin, seeped into her skin. "I'm ready," she said. "I know." "I mean it, Izuku. Whatever comes through those trees, I'm standing." He looked at her. The moonlight caught her pink skin, her golden eyes, her messy hair. Her face was set, jaw tight, eyes steady. He leaned over and kissed her forehead, pressed his lips there for a long moment. She closed her eyes. "I never doubted it," he said. It came on the fourth night. Gas first. Thick, purple, filling the forest floor like a rising tide. The students coughed, scrambled. Mandalay's telepathic broadcast cut through the confusion. "Villain attack. All students retreat to base camp. This is not a drill." The League of Villains, rebuilt, reorganized, operating under new leadership with All for One's network, providing resources from the shadows, hit the camp from every direction. Villains in the mist, villains in the trees. Quirk users with enhanced abilities. A coordinated assault designed to overwhelm, scatter, and extract. The target was Bakugo. That information wouldn't be clear until later. What was clear immediately was the scale of the attack. Dozens of villains, multiple approach vectors. The camp's defenses breached in under a minute. Izuku stood at the center of the base camp, the bonfire at his back. The orange firelight mixed with the ambient glow of his red eyes. His katana was in his hand. The black flames hadn't ignited yet. He didn't need them. He let the killing intent roll out of him like heat from an opened furnace. It spread across the campground in a wave. Every student felt it. A pressure in the chest, a weight on the lungs, a primal recognition that something fundamentally dangerous had just announced its presence. But they knew this feeling. They'd felt it before. It wasn't aimed at them. The villains felt it differently. Within 40 meters of Izuku, 3 villains stopped moving. Their bodies refused to advance. Survival instincts. The ancient, coded into the DNA kind, screamed at them that the thing standing in the firelight was not a target. It was a predator. It was the top of every food chain that had ever existed. 2 of them ran. One dropped his weapon, turned around, and sprinted into the trees so fast he tripped over a root and kept crawling. The third, a big man with a strength enhancement quirk and more courage than sense, charged. Izuku cut him down without moving his feet. 1 step forward, 1 horizontal slash, black flames igniting on the blade mid-swing. The man was ash before his momentum carried him past Izuku's position. "Anyone else?" Izuku said to the dark forest. Nobody volunteered. He dispatched 7 more who tried to push through the campground perimeter. Each one took a single engagement. Each one lasted less than 5 seconds. The students behind him, the younger ones, the ones from Class 1B who hadn't seen Izuku fight before, watched with expressions that ranged from awe to raw terror to something that might have been worship. Then Mandalay's telepathic voice cut through again, strained this time, urgent. "Compress has Bakugo. East quadrant, he's heading for extraction." Izuku's eyes snapped east. Mr. Compress, the theatrical villain with the compression marble quirk, was moving fast through the burning trees, a marble clutched in his gloved hand. Bakugo, reduced to the size of a marble, trapped inside it. The extraction plan. Izuku was already running. The forest blurred around him. Trees whipped past. Smoke stung his eyes. He didn't blink. Ahead, Compress was leaping between branches with the agility of an acrobat, his mask gleaming in the firelight, his cape billowing behind him. Compress heard the pursuit, heard the branches snapping, the footsteps that hit the ground like impacts. He turned, mid-leap, and his showman's instinct took over. "The war god himself," Compress called out, landing on a branch and giving an elaborate bow. "I'm honored. Truly. This is the kind of audience every performer dreams of." Izuku was below him, then beside him, then above. He had closed 50 meters in a heartbeat. Compress scrambled, compressed a section of trunk to create a barrier, threw the marble as a diversion, pivoted on the branch, and launched himself backward. Izuku burned through the compressed barrier without slowing. The black flames consumed the marble-sized chunk of wood in the same instant he recognized it wasn't the one that mattered. His eyes tracked Compress's hand. The right glove, the one still closed around the Bakugo marble. He let the pause do its work. One breath. He saw the pattern. Compress would compress the branch beneath his own feet, using the sudden absence of support to drop and change direction. Izuku was waiting at the drop point. His hand closed around Compress's wrist. The villain dangled from Izuku's grip 40 feet above the forest floor, mask askew, cape tangled in his own legs. "The marble," Izuku said. Compress looked at the hand holding him, looked at the red eyes above him, looked at the black flames that were beginning to lick across Izuku's knuckles, approaching his glove. He opened his palm. The marble fell. Izuku caught it in his free hand. Then Compress activated his emergency extraction. A warp point, a backup from the League's teleportation network. The mist swirled around him. Izuku released his wrist and let him go. The villain dissolved into the warp gate. Smart. Surviving was the only performance that mattered. The marble hit the ground and expanded. Bakugo materialized full-sized on his back in the dirt. His eyes were wild. His palms were sparking. He rolled to his feet, looked around, and found Izuku standing over him. The forest burned around them. Smoke coiled through the trees. Ash drifted. "Hey," Bakugo said. Izuku was already walking away. "Hey, Midoriya." Izuku stopped. Bakugo didn't say thank you. His jaw worked. His fists clenched at his sides. The sparks from his palms popped and fizzled. "I wasn't going to let them take me anyway," Bakugo said. A pause. Something shifted behind his eyes. Something that cost him to say. "But, yeah." Izuku glanced back over his shoulder, red eyes in firelight. One corner of his mouth lifted. "I know," he said. He kept walking. That was the closest thing to peace between them. Neither would ever name it. But it was there, buried in the ash of a burning forest, and it would hold. When the fighting ended and the camp was secured and the villains had either been captured or fled, Izuku found Mina. She was standing in a clearing on the south side of the camp. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder. Her left arm had a bruise the size of a boot, deep purple against the pink of her skin. Acid still dripped from her fingertips. Behind her, in the tree line, 3 villains lay unconscious in a pool of dissolved ground. She had held the entire southern approach by herself. A group of younger students huddled behind her, frightened but unharmed. She stood between them and everything that had come from the trees, and she hadn't moved. Izuku walked to her. He didn't say a word. He took her left arm gently, turned it, examined the bruise with his eyes. His jaw tightened. The red in his eyes burned a shade hotter. Then he wrapped his arms around her and held her against his chest. She leaned into him, her forehead pressed against his collarbone. Her breathing was ragged. "I held it," she said. "I know," he said. "I never doubted it." She closed her eyes. Her acid-slicked fingers left faint marks on the back of his shirt where she gripped it. Behind them, the younger students watched and said nothing. One of them, a small girl from 1B, was crying. But the kind of crying that came from relief, not fear. The camp attack changed things. Not just for UA, not just for Class 1A. Intelligence confirmed within 48 hours that the League had operated from a centralized base in Kamino Ward. That the new operational structure was still receiving support from All for One's network. That the attack on the camp was only the opening move. The hero world mobilized. The largest coordinated hero raid since All for One's last public appearance. Multiple agencies, multiple strike teams, All Might leading the charge on the primary location. The plan was comprehensive, layered, and built on the assumption that the worst-case scenario was another Nomu. The worst-case scenario was worse. All Might arrived in Kamino in full hero form. He entered the League's base, he found the bar, he found Kurogiri, he found the remaining League operatives, and he found All for One. The villain was waiting, seated in the back of the bar, suited, calm with the kind of stillness that came from absolute certainty. His ruined face, the medical implants, the scars, the eyeless sockets, turned toward All Might as the symbol of peace crashed through the wall. Toshinori, All for One, said, "It's been a while." The fight erupted. It went through the building, through the street, through 4 city blocks. All Might hit with everything. Detroit smash, Missouri smash, combinations of pure kinetic force that leveled structures and cracked the earth. All for One absorbed, redirected, countered with stolen quirks layered in combinations that made each attack a compound threat. The world watched. Live cameras, helicopter feeds, every screen in Japan showing the two titans tearing Kamino apart. All Might was losing. Not immediately, not obviously, but the time limit was eating him alive. His hero form flickered. His punches lost depth. Each exchange cost him more than the last, and All for One, patient, ancient, endlessly reinforced by stolen vitality, simply waited for the clock to run out. Izuku saw the mobilization order. He read the intelligence briefing. He made the assessment in 4 seconds. He was moving before the 5th. The pro heroes at the perimeter tried to stop him. Kamui Woods threw a restraining bind. Izuku's body heat evaporated the wood before it touched him. Mount Lady reached for him. He was past her fingers before they closed. Mina had been beside him when the news broke. She'd seen his face change, the shift from rest to war, the red eyes going flat. She grabbed his wrist. He looked at her. She looked at him. She knew. She always knew. She kissed him. Hard. One hand on his face, one fist clutching his shirt. When they broke apart, her eyes were fierce and wet and burning. "Come back," she said. "Always." She let go. He ran. Kamino Ward was a war zone. Fires, craters, collapsed buildings. The air tasted like concrete dust and ozone. The sky was the wrong color, a bruised orange lit by the constant exchange of devastating force somewhere ahead. Izuku dropped from above, a single leap that carried him over the hero perimeter and into the destruction zone. He landed in the center of a cratered street, hard enough to spider crack the asphalt in a 10-meter radius. All for One felt it. Mid-exchange with All Might, who was flagging, hero form guttering like a candle in wind, the ancient villain paused. His ruined face turned. The air had changed. The pressure had shifted. Something new had entered the field. Something that weighed more than everything else combined. All Might staggered. Blood on his lips. His form flickered between hero and true. He saw Izuku standing at the end of the street, crimson hair catching the firelight, black horns rising above the smoke. "Young Midoriya," All Might started. "I've got this," Izuku said. All for One's ruined mouth curved. "You?" Tamura's war god. "He wasn't mine, he was just in my way." The ancient villain tilted his head, the medical implants on his face whirred and clicked. "I've been watching you since the USJ, studying. You are anomalous. Your power doesn't behave like a quirk. It doesn't register on any scale I've encountered, and I have encountered every scale that exists." "Are you going to talk?" Izuku said, drawing his katana. "Or are you going to fight?" All for One laughed. Spin left a sound like gravel scraping glass. Both, I think. The first attack came without warning. Air cannon, layered with 3 force-multiplying stolen quirks, launched from All for One's palm in a concentrated blast that flattened the ground in a 100-meter radius. Buildings in the blast path folded like cardboard. The street turned to powder. The shockwave alone would have killed a normal person. Izuku raised his left hand. The black flames erupted from his palm. Not as a wall, but as a maw, a hungry void of pitch-black fire that opened in front of the blast and swallowed it whole. Every joule of force, every gram of compressed air, consumed, converted. The heat surged back into Izuku's body and his eyes flared brighter and his horns glowed at their bases and the air around him bent and warped. All for One paused. This was the first time the ancient villain had paused in a fight in a very long time. Decades. Perhaps longer. He had fought All Might to a standstill. He had fought the previous users of One for All. He had stood against the combined might of Hero Society and walked away. The boy standing at the end of the street had just eaten his best opening attack like it was breakfast. "Interesting," All for One said. "You keep saying that." Izuku's grip tightened on the katana. The black flames ignited along the blade. "Let me show you what interesting looks like up close." He moved. The distance between them, 60 meters of cratered street, evaporated. Izuku crossed it in a single stride that cracked the ground behind him and sent a shockwave that blew out every window within 2 blocks. His katana came down in a vertical arc, black flames screaming along the edge. All for One blocked with 3 quirks simultaneously: kinetic barrier, impact reversal, and a stolen hardening ability that reinforced his forearm into a shield of compressed matter. The katana hit the layered defense and the black flames chewed through the outer 2 layers in under a second. The third held. Barely. All for One pushed back. A stored impact reversal sent the kinetic energy of Izuku's strike back at double force. The shockwave hit Izuku in the chest and threw him backward through a building. He came out the other side still on his feet, boots grinding furrows in the rubble. He hadn't lost his grip on the katana. All for One tried to steal the black flames. His hand, the one built for quirk theft. The one that had stripped power from 1,000 victims over a century of predation, reached through the gap between them and closed around the concept of Izuku's fire. Nothing happened. His fingers closed on air. The black flames didn't respond to the theft. They didn't register as in the way All for One's ability could process. They were something else, something older, something written into Izuku at a level deeper than cells, deeper than DNA, deeper than anything the quirk system had language for. All for One's expression changed. For the first time since the fight began, for the first time since Izuku had walked into his awareness at the USJ, the ancient villain's composure broke, not into fear, into confusion, and confusion in a man who had controlled the flow of power for over a century was worse than fear. "What are you?" All for One said. Izuku answered by swinging. Black flame / extended form, both hands on the katana. The black flame swelled along the blade, expanding outward, growing, doubling, tripling. The air within 50 meters warped, light bent toward the edge. The temperature spiked so high that the street's surface liquefied. He released it. Not a crescent this time, a spiral. A corkscrew of pitch-black fire that screamed through the air with a sound like reality being torn along the seam. It hit All for One's layered defenses and bored through them. Each layer burning before the next could engage. The fire drilling through barrier after barrier with the unstoppable momentum of something that simply did not acknowledge resistance. All for One was hit. Directly. Full contact. The black flames ate through the left side of his life support system. Circuits fused. Medical tubing melted. The technological framework that kept his body functional, the stolen regeneration quirks, the medical implants, the decades of artificial reinforcement burned on the left side. Gone. And with it, 6 quirk storage nodes, not transferred back, not stolen, burned to nothing, erased. All for One staggered. For 1 second, the most dangerous man alive looked his age, looked his damage, looked like what he actually was, a ruin held together by theft and stubborn refusal. Then the desperation hit. All for One had 1 card left, a failsafe, a dead man's switch he'd held in reserve since the first age of quirks, a power transfer bomb. Every remaining stolen quirk detonated simultaneously in an explosive release. The theory was simple. If I burn, everything burns with me. The blast radius was measured in city blocks. He initiated it. The sky changed color. The air screamed. A pulling, nauseating force rippled outward from All for One's body. Gravity bending, light fracturing, the atmosphere itself being consumed to fuel the detonation. Every hero within range felt it. Those with combat experience knew what it meant. Get out. Get out now. All Might, on his knees in the rubble behind Izuku, tried to stand. "Young Midoriya, you have to." Izuku planted his feet. He raised both hands, palms open, and he reached into the detonation the way someone reaches into a furnace, because the alternative is everything they love being consumed. The black flames surged from both palms. They wrapped around the expanding detonation, around the stolen power, the compressed force, the entire payload of a century's worth of accumulated quirk energy, and they squeezed. His feet cracked the concrete, his arms shook, his horns glowed white. Tears of pure heat streamed from the corners of his eyes and evaporated before they reached his jaw. The veins in his forearms stood out like cables. His teeth were bared. His red eyes burned so bright they looked like twin stars. This was the first time Izuku Midoriya had strained in a fight. The first time, and he held it. The detonation screamed against the containment. The black flames screamed back. 2 forces, annihilation and consumption, locked in a war of absolute magnitude. The ground beneath Izuku cracked, split, sank. The buildings on either side of the street leaned away from the pressure like trees in a hurricane. He compressed it. Smaller, tighter, forcing the entire explosive payload into a sphere that shrank from city block to house size to car size to the size of a basketball to the size of a fist. Pitch black, vibrating. The entirety of All for One's legacy condensed into a singularity of stolen power waiting to be released. Izuku turned to All for One. The ancient villain was on his knees, depleted. The detonation had cost him everything. His quirks were spent. His body was failing. The medical systems that kept him alive were half destroyed. He had nothing left. He looked up at Izuku with the ruined holes where his eyes had been. His mouth moved. "The era I built is over," Izuku said. "Hell flare." He fired it at point-blank range. The sphere entered All for One's chest and expanded. Not outward, inward. The fires burned from the center, no explosion, no visible blast. All for One's body simply came apart at the most fundamental level. The suits, the hardware, the stolen quirks, the regeneration, the century of accumulated power. All of it burned. All for One fell to one knee, then to both, then forward. He made no sound. The black flames consumed what remained in absolute silence. When they faded, when the last ember guttered and died, there was nothing left. Not a body, not ash, not even a scorch mark. Just empty air where the greatest villain in history had knelt. Izuku stood there for a moment. He let the silence fill the space. Then he pulled the cloth from his belt and began to wipe his blade. Behind him, All Might was still standing. Barely. His hero form had given out completely. The deflated body, the hollowed cheeks, the blood on his chin. He stood in the rubble of Kamino Ward and looked at the empty space where All for One had been, and he understood. He walked to Izuku, slowly. Slowly. Each step cost him something. Young Midoriya. Izuku looked up from his blade. "I was afraid of what I saw in you at first," All Might said. His voice was raw, honest, stripped of every ounce of performance. "I think I understand now why that was wrong." Izuku waited. "I thought the world only needed one kind of hero, the kind who smiles and says, 'Everything is fine,' the kind who carries everyone's fear on their shoulders." All Might's true face, thin, tired, honest, looked at Izuku with something that had taken decades to form. "I was wrong. The world needed you too, the kind who faces what cannot be smiled away and burns it down." Izuku was quiet. The wind moved the smoke around them. In the distance, sirens wailed. "I'm not doing this for the world," Izuku said. "I'm doing it for mine." All Might looked at him. Then slowly, the small smile, the real one, not the 100-watt symbol. The man underneath. "I know," All Might said. He raised his fist one last time. The cameras were somewhere behind the police line. Drones, helicopters, everything pointed at this moment. "United States of Smash," All Might said. Not as an attack, as a farewell, a goodbye to the form, to the era, to the 30 years of smiling through pain. He'd used the attack earlier in the fight, before Izuku arrived. This was just the ending. Out loud, in the rubble, in front of the whole world. The cameras caught it. The world would replay it for generations. Izuku looked at the raised fist, at the man behind it, at the hollow form that held the most enormous spirit he'd ever encountered. He nodded once. Respect, genuine and unreserved. Then he sheathed his katana, turned, and walked through the rubble. The heroes parted for him. The cameras tracked him. And at the edge of the cleared zone, standing exactly where she should not have been because the police line meant nothing to a girl who could dissolve barriers with her bare hands, was Mina. Ash in her pink hair, gold fire in her black eyes, fists at her sides. He walked to her. She walked to him. They met in the center of the wreckage. She took his hand, both of them, turned them over, checking, examining. Her fingers traced his knuckles, his palms, his wrists. She found the raw spot, one knuckle where the pressure of containing the detonation had cracked the skin, a small wound, the only mark the fight had left. She wrapped both her hands around his and held it against her chest. "You're stupid," she said. "I'm alive." Same thing. "Don't ever." She stopped, breathed. "Just don't." He curled his fingers through hers. "I came back?" "Yeah." She pressed his knuckles against her lips. "Yeah, you did." The cameras caught that too. By morning, the image, the war god and the acid queen standing in the ruins of Kamino, her lips against his knuckles, ash falling around them, was on the front page of every news outlet in the country. The fallout was seismic. All for One was gone. Not captured. Not imprisoned. Gone. The shadow that had haunted Hero Society for over a century had been burned out of existence by a 15-year-old boy with crimson hair. All Might retired. The announcement was public, formal, and carried on every channel. The symbol of peace, stepping down. The era was over. The #1 spot was vacant. And every conversation, every ranking debate, every agency meeting, every government briefing, every late-night talk show and analyst panel circled the same name like satellites around a sun. Izuku Midoriya. The provisional hero license exam was 3 weeks later. For most of the students, it was the culmination of months of preparation. For Izuku, it was paperwork. He completed every section faster than the examiners had ever recorded. The combat portion lasted 40 seconds. His opponents refused to engage after the first 15. The rescue section was flawless. The written portion was finished in half the allotted time. The judgment scenarios were handled with an efficiency that made the lead examiner call a post-exam review meeting to discuss whether Izuku should be given a special track license instead of the standard provisional. They gave him the standard one. The special track didn't technically exist yet. Mina passed on her second attempt. Her first was voided because her acid dissolved a load-bearing wall in the exam facility, which technically counted as structural sabotage even though she was aiming at a villain bot. She passed the second time with scores that put her in the top 15%. She held up her license from the stands. Izuku was watching from below, arms crossed, leaning against the facility wall. She screamed his name and waved the card like a flag. He gave her the slow nod. The real smile came after when she wasn't looking. But Kirishima saw it and elbowed Kaminari, and Kaminari saw it and nearly electrocuted himself from excitement. The Hero Billboard chart released a provisional ranking, a special edition. Izuku Midoriya, provisional license, first-year student, listed at number 6. The commentary noted that his score was capped by the limitation of the provisional license. Hawks, at number 3, saw the ranking on his tablet. He set it down, picked up his phone, texted his agency director 3 words, "Give me 2 years." Endeavor, at number 1 by default, saw the ranking and burned his desk chair for the 3rd time. His secretary had started buying them in bulk, and in a room at UA that smelled like tea and old books, All Might saw the ranking on the evening news. He sat in his chair and smiled. It was the small smile, the genuine one. "Number 6, he said to the empty room, and he's just getting started. The overhaul arc started with a child. It started with Eri. Izuku had taken an internship with Hawk's agency. The number 3 hero had made himself impossible to ignore, sending requests on everything from official letterhead to cocktail napkins to individual feathers with messages tied to them. Hawks was sharp, observant. He smiled constantly and meant it approximately 40% of the time. He was always 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room, except, occasionally, the boy with the horns. Their working relationship was professional with an edge of mutual respect that neither of them fully verbalized. Hawks shared intelligence because it benefited both of them. Izuku accepted it for the same reason. "The Shi-Hasaikai," Hawks said one afternoon, dropping a file on the desk between them. They were in his agency office 30 floors above Musutafu. Hawks was perched on the windowsill because sitting in chairs was apparently beneath him. "Yakuza holdouts. They've been manufacturing something. A drug. What kind?" "The kind that takes quirks away." Izuku's eyes didn't change. His hand didn't move. But the temperature in the room went up 3 degrees. Hawks felt it. His wings twitched. Their leader is Kai Chisaki, calls himself Overhaul. His quirk lets him take things apart and put them back together at a molecular level. People, objects, buildings, anything he touches. "And the drug?" Hawk's expression shifted. The smile stayed, but the warmth behind it drained. "He's making it from a kid." The silence that followed was not the comfortable kind. "A girl," Hawk said. 6 years old, white hair, a horn. Her quirk can rewind biological states. Overhaul's been using her body as the raw material for the drug, taking her apart and reassembling her, over and over. The temperature in the room climbed another 5 degrees. The papers on Hawks' desk curled at the edges. Hawks looked at the rising heat haze and decided not to push further. "I'm giving you everything I've got on the Hasaikai. Intel, layouts, personnel. Do what you want with it." Izuku took the file. He didn't open it. He looked at Hawks with those flat red eyes. "I want the girl's location." "It's in there." Izuku stood. He walked toward the door. "Midoriya." Hawks' voice stopped him. The hero's expression was serious, genuinely serious. No smile, no angle. "Be careful with Overhaul. He's not a brute. He's a surgeon who uses his hands instead of instruments. Getting close to him means getting in range. I know. And the kid, Eri. She's been through things that would break most adults. When you find her, remember that." Izuku looked back at him. Something behind his red eyes shifted. Not anger, something deeper. "I know what it looks like," Izuku said, "to be a child who frightens people. Hawks didn't respond to that. But his wings went very still. He encountered Eri 3 days later outside the Hasaikai compound, an alley. She had slipped out. A gap in security, a moment where no one was watching, the desperate courage of a 6-year-old who had learned that running was worth any punishment that followed. She was small, painfully small. White hair, enormous red eyes, bandages wrapped around her arms and legs, covering marks that Izuku's mind processed and his jaw tightened against. And on her forehead a single horn, small, gray, slightly curved. She saw him first, saw the horns, the black ones, the crimson hair, the eyes that burned. She froze. He stopped walking, slowly, the way you stop moving around something fragile. He lowered himself, one knee on the concrete, eye level. She stared at his horns. She reached up. Her finger, tiny, trembling, touched the tip of his right horn. "Those are horns too," she said. Her voice was barely a sound. "They are." "Does it hurt?" "Not even a little." She looked at him, then behind her, then at him again. Her fingers gripped the edge of his jacket. 2 fingers. Barely anything, but she held on. Overhaul's men appeared at the alley mouth. 2 of them. Suited. Gloved. Their faces were polite. Their eyes were not. "The girl has a condition," the first one said. "She needs to return with us." "For her own safety," the second added. Izuku didn't stand. He was still kneeling. Still at Eri's eye level. The girl's fingers hadn't released his jacket. "She is clearly not going with you," Izuku said. The first man's politeness dropped. He moved fast, faster than a normal person should, enhanced chemically or through a quirk. His hand reached for Eri. Izuku caught the arm. Left hand, without standing, he twisted. The wrist hyperextended. The man gasped. Izuku held the lock and looked at the second man. The second man pulled something from his coat, a syringe. The quirk-destroying drug. Izuku was on his feet, and the katana was drawn before the syringe cleared the coat. The blade tip rested under the second man's chin. The black flames crawled along the steel. The man's collar smoked. "Tell Overhaul," Izuku said, "that his operation is finished." The third man, the one Izuku had already catalogued at the alley's far entrance, the one who thought he was hidden, bolted. Izuku let him run. Let them all run. Because the message was the thing that mattered, and messages traveled faster when carried by people who were afraid. He knelt back down to Eri. She hadn't screamed, hadn't moved. She'd watched the exchange with eyes that were too old for her face, and when he was at her level again, she said, "They'll come back. I know. They always come back. So will I." She looked at him. He met her eyes. "I will come back for you," he said. "Do you understand? I will come back." She nodded, slowly. She let go of his jacket. He watched her walk back toward the compound entrance with the 2 men who had come for her. He watched the door close. And something in his chest, in that place that had recognized Mina's tears behind a gymnasium, that had known before his brain could name it that some things required a response that went beyond thought, locked into place. He stood up. He pulled out his phone. He called Hawks. "I need a raid," he said. "Now." The raid on the Hasaikai compound was the most coordinated hero operation since Kamino. Aizawa led the official strike team. Hawks provided aerial intel and extraction support. Night Eye, All Might's former sidekick, a man who could see the future and desperately wished he couldn't, coordinated the tactical approach. And Izuku was the spearhead. The compound was a fortress, underground levels, reinforced walls, quirk-enhanced security, and between the entrance and Eri, an entire layer of Hasaikai enforcers. 8 of them, each powerful, each loyal to Overhaul, with the fanatical devotion of people who believed they were building a new world. Izuku went through them. The first was a man who could manipulate his own body fat into hardened shields. Izuku's black flames ate through the shields, and the man dropped in 3 seconds. The second pair, partners who could fuse their quirks into a combined attack, launched a synchronized assault that would have overwhelmed a lesser fighter. Izuku deflected one strike with his blade and punched through the other with a flame-coated fist. Both were down before the fusion completed. The third was a drunk who could command his own body with increasing unpredictability. His movements were random, chaotic, impossible to anticipate. Izuku waited. One pause. Saw the opening. Cut him down. The fourth and fifth came together in a cramped corridor. Izuku fought them in close quarters. No room for wide swings, no room for hell flare, just tight, precise blade work and hands that burned at 1,000 degrees. They lasted longer than the others. 8 seconds. Maybe 9. The 6th was chronostasis, a man with clock hand hair who could slow his target's movements through contact. He grazed Izuku's sleeve. Izuku felt the deceleration. His left arm slowed. His reactions on that side dropped by half. He switched the katana to his right hand and cut chronostasis down with a single strike. The deceleration faded 3 seconds later. The 7th ran. The 8th, Nemoto, a man whose quirk forced targets to speak the truth, tried a different approach. He stepped in front of Izuku, raised his hand and said, "Tell me, are you afraid of what waits below?" The quirk activated. The compulsion hit Izuku's mind. "No," Izuku said. "Honest, complete, the truth spoken as fact because it was fact." Nemoto stared at him. Izuku walked past him. He didn't bother with a strike. Nemoto sat down on the floor of the corridor and did not get back up. The final chamber. Overhaul's lab. Kaichisaki stood in the center of a room that smelled like antiseptic and something worse underneath. He was tall, slim, his mask covered his mouth and nose. His gold eyes were flat and contemptuous. His gloved hands hung at his sides. Behind him, the vault door to Ares' holding cell. "The war god," Overhaul said. His voice was even. Controlled, not impressed. "You've made a mess of my operation. I'm about to make a mess of you." Overhaul raised one hand. He touched the floor. The room came alive. The concrete erupted upward in spikes. The walls reformed into closing panels. The ceiling restructured into a descending press. The entire architecture of the chamber became a weapon, aimed at the single point where Izuku stood. He burned through it. The spikes hit the black flames and dissolved. The panels pressed in and met fire that ate through concrete like acid through tissue. The ceiling came down and Izuku swung upward, one slash that split the descending mass in two and sent both halves crashing to either side. But Overhaul was already moving. His hands touched everything. The rubble reformed into new attacks. The floor became a wave, the walls generated fists, the room was alive and hostile and endlessly renewable because Overhaul didn't destroy, he recycled. Every piece of his environment was an infinite weapon, and he was reaching for Izuku. One touch. That was all it would take. One touch of those gloved fingers and the disassembly began. Izuku had read the intelligence. He knew. He kept his distance, fought at blade length, used the reach of the katana and the range of the black flames to maintain the gap. Every time Overhaul closed to touching distance, Izuku retreated. Every time the environment shifted, he cut through it. They fought through the lab, through the corridor behind it, through the reinforced walls that Overhaul restructured into barriers, into weapons, into traps. The compound reshaped itself around their fight like a living organism responding to trauma. Then, Overhaul played his final card. He grabbed Chronostasis, the unconscious enforcer lying in the hallway where Izuku had left him. Overhaul's hand closed on the man's arm, and the quirk activated, disassembly and reconstruction at full output. Fusing two bodies and two quirks into a single entity, what emerged was not human, not in shape, not in scale. A towering, grotesque fusion. Overhaul's intelligence driving a body that was 20 feet tall, multi-armed, with the clock hand hair integrated into every limb as deceleration weapons. The combined form hit the ceiling, and the ceiling gave way above it. The compound crumbled upward. The fusion burst through to ground level. It stood in the open air of the courtyard, massive and wrong, and it looked down at Izuku with Overhaul's gold eyes. Izuku looked up at it. "Hell flare," he said. "Full output." The sphere formed above his right palm. The black flames compressed further. The air warped. Light bent. The temperature within 3 meters of his hand exceeded anything the surrounding environment could sustain. The concrete beneath his feet turned to glass. The walls on either side of him glowed cherry red. The air itself seemed to scream. He released it. The sphere hit the fusion form's center mass. There was no drawn-out battle, no clash of powers, no dramatic exchange. The black flames hit, and they consumed. The regeneration couldn't keep pace. The reconstruction couldn't outrun the fire. Overhaul's quirk tried to reassemble what the flames were eating, and the flames ate the reassembled parts too. 4 seconds. The fusion came apart. Chronostasis separated first, ejected from the combined form as the fire overwhelmed the integration. He hit the ground unconscious but alive. Overhaul followed. The fire stripped away the enhanced form layer by layer until what remained was a man in a torn suit, maskless, on his hands and knees in the rubble. His gloves were gone. His hands were burned. His quirk could not activate without his hands, and his hands were no longer functional. Izuku stood over him. Overhaul looked up. His gold eyes were wide. For the first time, something other than contempt lived in them. "You don't understand," Overhaul breathed. "The quirk plague, society is sick. It needs to be." "You tortured a child," Izuku said. "I don't care about your philosophy." He turned away from Overhaul. The villain wasn't going anywhere. The heroes flooding through the compound breach would handle the rest. He walked to the vault. The door was reinforced, triple locked. Overhaul had built it to contain a child who could rewind reality. Izuku placed his palm against the door. The black flames ate through 2 feet of reinforced steel in 5 seconds. The door fell inward. The room was small, bare, a single cot, a single light. The walls were covered in marks, fingernail scratches, height measurements, the accumulated evidence of a child who had lived in this room for years. Eri was in the corner, knees to her chest, arms around her legs, white hair over her face. She heard him come in. She looked up. She saw the horns in the doorway. She uncurled. She stood up. She crossed the room. She wrapped both arms around his waist and held on with the desperate strength of a 6-year-old who had decided with total certainty that the person standing in front of her was the safest thing in the world. Izuku put one hand on her head, carefully, the way he touched things that mattered more than anything. "I told you I'd come back," he said. She didn't say anything. She held tighter. Behind him, in the ruins of the compound, hawks landed on a piece of rubble. He surveyed the devastation. The melted walls, the scorched corridors, the vault door turned to slag. He pushed the feathers back from his face. "Every time," he said. "Every single time." He was grinning. He couldn't help it. Eri was taken into Yue's care. Recovery Girl handled the medical examination. Aizawa handled the paperwork. Nezu handled the legal framework that allowed a hero academy to become the legal guardian of a traumatized child. And Mina handled Eri, not with gravity, not with careful professional distance, with warmth, pure, bright, overwhelming warmth. She walked up to Eri on the first day, knelt down and said, "Hi, I'm Mina. Your horn is beautiful. Want to see mine?" Eri stared at her. Mina pointed at her own small horns, wiggled her eyebrows, made a ridiculous face. Eri's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not yet. But the beginning of one. Within a week, Eri was following Mina around the common room like a pink and white shadow. Within 2 weeks, she had started following Izuku too. She would walk into a room, spot him sitting with his katana across his knees and his flat expression, and she would sit down 3 feet away from him without asking, without speaking, just near him. He let her. He never asked her to move. He never asked her to talk. He just let her exist in his space, and the warmth that radiated from his body, the constant furnace heat of the Kijin, wrapped around her like a blanket. One evening, she fell asleep sitting beside him, leaning against the arm of his chair, her white hair falling across her face, her breathing slow and even. Izuku didn't move for 2 hours. Mina found them like that. She stood in the doorway of the common room and looked at the picture. The boy with black horns and a katana and a sleeping child curled against him, and something in her chest expanded in a way that made her eyes burn. She crossed the room. She kissed his forehead. She whispered, "You're going to be an incredible father someday." His red eyes met hers. Something moved behind them, something too large for words. "Someday," he said. The Meta Liberation Army came 6 months later. They were not the League. The League had been criminals, motivated by chaos, by personal vendettas, by ideologies built on broken foundations. The MLA was different. They were organized. They were funded. They were true believers. Redestro, real name Rikiya Yotsubashi, CEO of a major corporation, descendant of the original meta-liberation ideology, led an army of over 100,000 supporters. His quirk, stress, converted accumulated pressure into a power amplifier. The more stressed he became, the stronger he grew. In maximum output, he could level city blocks, and he had been preparing for Izuku Midoriya specifically. The intelligence files were comprehensive. Redestro's analysts had compiled every piece of available data on the Black Flames: combat footage, thermal signatures, energy output estimates, response time calculations. They had built containment models, designed counterformations, recruited quirk users whose specific abilities could, in theory, neutralize or contain the fire. Redestro believed, with the confidence of a man who had spent millions on analysis and preparation, that he understood what Izuku Midoriya was. The MLA marched on Deka City, 100,000 strong. The heroes mobilized in response. Every available agency, every available hero, a coordinated defense of the city's population. And Izuku went straight for the center. The containment formation was Redestro's masterpiece. 12 quirk users arranged in a geometric pattern around the battlefield, each one contributing a specific function. Heat absorption, kinetic dampening, energy redirection, spatial anchoring. Together they formed a net designed to catch the black flames and neutralize them. Izuku walked into the formation. He felt the net activate, felt the edges of his fire being pulled, dampened, redirected. The containment nodes hummed with power. He stood still for 5 seconds, read the formation, identified the pattern. Then he took out the nodes in reverse order, not the order they expected, not the order anyone would logically target. The reverse, starting with the node that was furthest from him and most heavily defended, because that was the one Redestro's contingency plans were least prepared to replace. He moved between them like a crimson wind. Each node fell. Each one took a single strike, katana or flame or fist, whatever the gap in their defenses presented first. By the 4th, Redestro's analysts were scrambling. By the 8th, the formation had collapsed. By the 12th, the containment net was gone. Redestro felt it fail, felt the net dissolve, felt the full, unfiltered weight of Izuku Midoriya's presence crash back into the battlefield like a tide returning. They faced each other in the center of Deka City. Buildings burning around them, MLA soldiers engaging heroes in every direction. Chaos, noise, fire. Redestro was in maximum output. His body had swelled, the stress quirk pushing his muscles past human limits, his frame towering at 15 feet, his skin blackened from the sheer pressure of the power running through him. He radiated force. The ground cracked beneath his feet with every step. "I modeled every known variable of your power," Redestro said. His voice was deep, resonant, shaking with conviction. "You cannot win this." Izuku looked at him. 15 feet of amplified fury and ideology. "You modeled the wrong thing." "What did I miss?" "The intent behind it." Redestro charged. He swung a fist that was bigger than Izuku's entire body. The air displaced by the swing alone knocked over a parked car. Izuku stepped inside the swing, planted his feet, and punched upward. His fist, coated in black flames, hit Redestro's jaw. The impact traveled through the amplified body, and the stress quirk tried to absorb it, tried to convert the damage into more power. But the black flames weren't force. They were fire, and fire didn't convert. Fire consumed. Redestro staggered. The first time in his life, the fight was brief but massive. Redestro threw everything, building-crushing blows, ground-shattering stomps, the accumulated stress of a man who had spent his life carrying the weight of an inherited ideology. Each attack was enormous. Each one shook the city. Izuku burned through them all. He fought with a focus that went beyond aggression. Every move had purpose. Every strike served the next one. Gran Torino's lessons lived in his body now. The pause, the read, the choice. He let Redestro commit. He let the big man overextend, and then he punished every gap. Mid-fight, Izuku stopped. Just for a moment. Redestro was gathering himself up for another charge, and Izuku said, "I have never been restrained, and I still protect people. Your theory is wrong because it leaves out the thing that matters most." "Which is," Redestro roared, "what you do with the freedom." Izuku's red eyes were steady. "You chose to aim it at cities. I aim it at threats. That's the only difference between a hero and what you are." Redestro charged. Izuku drew his katana, both hands on the grip. The black flame swelled along the blade. Black flame slash. The crescent launched. It crossed the gap between them in a heartbeat and hit Redestro's maximum form dead center. The fire split the amplified body down the middle, and the stress energy, the accumulated power of a lifetime of pressure, dispersed into the atmosphere in a wave of harmless heat that rippled across the city and made the clouds above scatter. Redestro fell. The amplification faded. He returned to his normal size, unconscious, sprawled in the street. Behind him, across the city, the MLA saw their leader fall. They had been fighting with the conviction of true believers. That conviction wavered, then broke, then scattered. The ideology that had assembled 100,000 people collapsed in the time it took a boy to swing a sword. In the aftermath of the MLA's fall, the hero world reorganized. Rankings shifted. Power structures realigned. And the annual Hero Billboard chart release became the most anticipated event since the sports festival. Endeavor was listed at number 1. He had held the position since All Might's retirement, maintained it through professional diligence and raw power, and absolutely no one, including Endeavor himself, believed he would hold it much longer. Hawks was number 2. Mirko was 3. And Izuku Midoriya, on a provisional license that was about to become a full one, was listed at number 7 on the projected Next Generation chart. Hawks sent Izuku a message. 7! They're going to feel silly in 6 months. Izuku didn't respond. He showed the message to Mina. She cackled. The licensing board offered Izuku the early graduation path to a full hero license, the first time the option had been extended in 11 years. The examination was comprehensive. The board was thorough. They tested everything. He passed every section. The examiner's formal report was 3 words: no further testing warranted. He received his full hero license at 16. Mina framed hers and hung it above her bed. She announced, loudly and in front of the entire common room, that it was the most important thing she owned. Izuku gave her a look. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "It's important. You can be the second most important thing." "I am." She threw a pillow at him. He caught it. She threw another. He caught that too. She threw Kaminari's shoe, which she'd grabbed from beside the couch. He caught it, looked at it, and set it down. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Collateral damage," she said. Kaminari, across the room, patted his left foot and looked confused. The world stage opened. An international terrorist organization with quirk-amplifying technology escalated across 4 countries simultaneously. Hostage situations in Tokyo, Paris, New York, and São Paulo. Multiple hero agencies coordinated the response. It was the largest multinational hero operation in a decade. Izuku, now fully licensed and operating through Hawk's agency, was assigned to the Tokyo location. The most fortified, the most defended, the one where 2 prior tactical approaches had failed. He told Hawks, "I'll have the hostages out in 40 minutes. Hawks blinked. The tactical team estimated 3 hours. They're wrong. He went in at 9 p.m. The facility was hardened, quirk-dampening walls, electronic countermeasures, 30 armed combatants with amplified abilities, 26 hostages in a central chamber rigged with explosive fail-safes. Izuku burned through the outer security in 4 minutes. He dismantled the quirk-dampening array by superheating the control unit until it became slag. He cleared 3 floors of combatants in 11 minutes, using the katana for close quarters and the black flames for everything else. He reached the central chamber and assessed the explosive failsafes in 2 seconds. He burned the detonators. All of them, simultaneously. A pulse of black flames, focused and precise, that hit every wired junction in the room and consumed the circuitry without touching the hostages. 26 people, unharmed, walked out of the building at 9:37 p.m. Izuku walked out behind them. The international hero community watched the operation footage in stunned silence. An American hero agency sent a formal partnership inquiry to UA within the hour. A French agency followed. Then 2 more. 6 weeks after his full license was issued, the Hero Billboard chart released an emergency update. Izuku Midoriya, hero name, Kijin, number 3. Behind Endeavor, behind Hawks, Endeavor burned another chair. His secretary stopped ordering replacements and started budgeting for fireproof furniture. Hawks sent a message. "Told you." Izuku read it, set his phone down, went back to training. That night, he told Mina. She was already watching the broadcast on her tablet. She looked up at him in the smile, wide, warm, so genuinely proud it filled every corner of the room, hit him in the chest harder than anything he'd fought this year. "Number 3, she said. "For now," he said. "For now," she agreed. She set the tablet down and wrapped her arms around him. He tucked her against his chest, his chin rested on her head, her horns pressed into his collarbone. Below them, in the common room, the news played on repeat. His name. His face, his ranking, up here in her room, none of that existed. Just the 2 of them. Just the warmth. "Izuku?" "Yeah? Whatever comes next, we do it together. Always." She pressed closer. He held on tighter. And the evening settled around them like a blanket, and for 1 hour, the war god was just a boy holding the girl he loved. What came next came 6 months later. All for one had fail-safes. The deepest one was a consciousness transfer. Not complete, not stable, but enough. A fragment, a remnant. A will that had spent a century refusing to end and was not about to start now. It had been incubating since Kamino. Growing in the body of a former research scientist behind the Nomu program, a man who had voluntarily undergone a quirk experimentation sequence designed by All for One's own hand before his death. The process was agonizing, the fusion was imperfect, but the product was functional. Vantablack, the name was chosen deliberately, named for the material that absorbed all light, named for the philosophy it represented, total, absolute absorption. The remnant of All for One's consciousness merged with the scientist's knowledge, producing something that was neither the original nor the host, but a third entity that carried the worst qualities of both, and it had been studying every piece of available footage, every combat analysis, every thermal reading, every energy output calculation, every fraction of a second captured on camera at the USJ, at the sports festival, at Hosu, at Kamino, at the Hasaikai compound, at Deika City. It had built a complete model of Izuku Midoriya's combat behavior. It had prepared. The announcement came on a Thursday evening. Every screen in Japan, televisions, phones, tablets, digital billboards flickered and went white. Then a voice. Not All for One's destroyed rasp, newer, cleaner, but carrying the same weight. The hero system is a lie. The strong belong at the top, and the boy who killed the master will be the final proof that power without ideology is nothing. A pause. Midoriya Izuku. The name hung in the air. You ended a chapter. You did not end the story. Come to the place where heroes die, and we will finish what you started. Coordinates. The ruins of Tartarus. The collapsed maximum security prison, the broadcast cut. Izuku watched it in the common room of the UA dorms. The room was full. Class 1A, faculty, stragglers from 1B who'd been visiting. Every eye on the screen, then every eye on him. He was already standing up. He finished the last bite of his dinner, set his chopsticks on the tray, picked up his katana from where it leaned against the wall. Mina was across the room. Their eyes met. She set down her cup. She stood. She crossed to him. She fixed his collar, straightened the cord on his katana sheath. She'd done this before every serious fight since they were 14. She took her time. Her fingers moved with the careful attention of someone performing a ritual that mattered more than anyone watching could understand. When she was done, she looked up at him, golden eyes, fierce, clear, no tears, no trembling. End it, she said. Always. She kissed him, short, direct. The entire room was watching. Neither of them registered anyone else's existence. He turned and walked toward the door. Kirishima called out, "Give him hell, man!" Kaminari raised a fist. Todoroki, standing by the window, nodded once, one warrior to another. Bakugo was leaning against the far wall. His arms were crossed. His expression was unreadable. As Izuku reached the door, Bakugo said, without looking up, "Don't take too long." Izuku glanced back. The corner of his mouth lifted. Then he was gone. The ruins of Tartarus rose from the sea like the skeleton of a dead beast. The maximum security prison had collapsed during the aftermath of Kamino. The power vacuum caused by All for One's death had triggered cascading failures in the containment systems. The villains inside had been relocated, most of them. But the structure remained, a gutted monument to the hero world's attempt to cage what should have been destroyed. Vantablack had reactivated the outer cell blocks, freed criminals from the still-functioning containment units, built a buffer of bodies between the perimeter and the central chamber. Izuku arrived by helicopter, Hawk's agency, because Hawks was not going to miss the coordination on this one, even if he'd been specifically asked to stand down, which he had, and which he'd ignored. "Outer ring is hot," Hawk said over the comms. 30-plus freed villains, mixed threat levels. The real target is in the central chamber. I know. Backups on the perimeter. We can sweep the... I don't need a sweep. Hawks went quiet. Then, yeah, I know. The helicopter banked. Izuku jumped. He hit the outer ring of Tartarus like a falling star. The landing cratered the concrete. The shockwave knocked 3 villains off their feet before they registered his presence. He didn't stop. The outer ring fell in 90 seconds. 33 villains, some armed, some enhanced, none prepared for what walked through their barricades without pausing. The black flames left a trail of scorched concrete and scattered ash that the perimeter heroes arriving behind him used as a path. The inner chamber. It had been the Warden's command center. Reinforced. Buried. The walls were 6 feet thick and built to contain quirks that could level cities. Izuku burned through the door. Vantablack was waiting. The entity sat in the center of the chamber in a chair that had been fashioned from the remnants of a containment unit. They were of average build, nondescript features, dark clothing. Nothing about their appearance suggested that the threat they represented, except the eyes. 2 eyes that burned with the specific, ancient, terrible intelligence of a mind that had lived for over a century and refused to die. "You came," Vantablack said. The voice was even, conversational, almost friendly. "I wasn't sure you would." "You broadcast your location to every screen in the country," Izuku said. "You made sure I would." "True. I wanted witnesses." "You'll get them." Vantablack stood. The chair dissolved, literally. The matter came apart at their touch. A demonstration of the reconstruction quirk they'd inherited from the experimentation. Then the air around them shifted. An absorption field, a predictive quirk haze, a shock accumulation buffer, layered defenses, each one specifically designed based on months of analysis. "I've studied you," Vantablack said. "Every fight, every technique, every escalation pattern. I know how you open. I know how you press. I know exactly what Hell Flare looks like before it launches." "Then you should be running," Vantablack smiled. "Or I should be ready." The fight began. Izuku opened with a horizontal black flame slash. The crescent of fire screamed across the chamber, and the absorption quirk caught it. The flames hit an invisible field and were pulled in, drained, neutralized. The fire vanished. Izuku processed this in a fraction of a second. He followed with a direct engagement, katana drawn, closing distance, going for a blade strike. Vantablack's predictive quirk projected the arc. They sidestepped. The katana passed through empty air. Izuku reversed, slashed again, predicted, dodged. A third strike, 4th, 5th. Each one read by the predictive quirk and avoided by millimeters. Then Izuku threw a fist coated in black flames. Vantablack caught it, not with their hand, with the absorption field. The flames were pulled from his fist and consumed into the buffer. The shock accumulation quirk began to fill, converting the absorbed impact into stored energy. For the first time in a fight, Izuku's offensive tools were being dismantled at the point of contact. He stepped back. The pause. He stood in the ruins of the chamber and he thought. Not for long. Not the labored, second-guessing kind of thought. The kind Gran Torino had taught him. The kind that lived in the breath between action and reaction. The space where the answer already existed if you stopped moving long enough to hear it. Vantablack had modeled the black flames as an external energy source. The absorption quirk was tuned to neutralize external energy. The predictive quirk was calibrated to read weapon arcs. The shock accumulation was designed to punish impact. Every defense was designed against what Izuku showed the world. None of them were designed for what he kept inside. The shift was immediate. He sheathed his katana. Vantablack's eyes narrowed. Disarming? That's not in any of my... Izuku concentrated the black flames inward. Every ember, every spark, every degree of heat, pulled from the external, pushed into the internal. His skin became the furnace. His bones became the fuel. His muscles burned at their maximum. Every fiber supercharged by flame that lived inside him rather than outside. His eyes flared so bright they left after images. He moved. The absorption quirk couldn't process it. Internal combustion didn't register as external energy. It read as body heat. Ambient. Negligible. The field let him through. The predictive quirk couldn't model it. It was calibrated for weapon arcs, for energy projections, for the patterns of a fighter using tools. A fighter using nothing but his body, moving with the fluidity of someone who carried a war god's muscle memory. That was outside the model. Izuku's fist hit Vantablack's sternum. No flames, no flash, just impact. Pure, absolute, full-body impact powered by internal combustion at a temperature that would kill a normal human. The punch connected and the shockwave blew the walls of the chamber outward. Vantablack flew. They hit the far wall, cratered it, bounced off, and hit the floor. They rolled. Tried to stand. Izuku was already there. 4 moves. The first punch buckled their guard. The second broke through it. The third sent them skidding across the floor. The fourth, an uppercut that launched them into the ceiling, cracked every defensive quirk they had running simultaneously. Vantablack hit the ground. The shock accumulation triggered, involuntary, desperate, every stored jewel detonating at once. The explosion leveled the chamber. The walls blew out. The ceiling collapsed. A sphere of force expanded outward from Vanna Black's body that would have killed anyone within 50 meters. Izuku was within 3 meters. The explosion hit him full force. The pressure wave, the kinetic blast, every stored joule of impact from the entire fight released in a single detonation, he slid backward. 3 meters across the rubble. His feet ground furrows in the concrete. He stopped. He stood up. He looked at Vanna Black. The entity was depleted, shaking. Every quirk burned out from the overload. The consciousness transfer that drove them was fading. The imperfect fusion between All for One's life fragment and the scientist's body was coming apart under the strain. Vanna Black looked up. The eyes, the ancient terrible eyes, were dimming. The intelligence behind them flickered. "Wait," Vanna Black said. The voice cracked. Something older bled through. Something that sounded like the man who had started all of this. "You can't. The era I built is over," Izuku said. He raised his right hand. The black flames formed above his palm. Small, focused, a single point of absolute consumption. Not the city-destroying sphere of Kamino, not the full output blast that had ended Overhaul. A single, final point of fire, everything the Kijin carried. Concentrated into something no larger than a marble, burning with everything it had ever consumed. "This is for everyone you made into a weapon," Izuku said. His voice was low, steady, and for the girl with white hair and a horn. He released it, the sphere crossed the gap, it entered Vanna Black's chest, and the fires of the Kijin burned the last remnant of All for One from the world. No explosion, no spectacle. The entity came apart from the inside. The fragment of consciousness, the stolen quirks, the experimental augmentations, the stubborn refusal of a century-old will, all of it consumed. When the flames faded, there was nothing left. Izuku stood in the ruins for a moment. Smoke rose, dust settled. The chamber was open to the sky now. The ceiling had collapsed outward, and the stars were visible through the gap. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, dialed. She answered before the first ring finished. "Done?" Mina said. "Done." A breath. Long. Shaking. "Come home. On my way." He pocketed the phone. He walked out of the ruins, through the cleared outer ring, past the hero perimeter, past the cameras, past Hawks, who was standing on a piece of rubble with his wings spread and his phone in his hand and an expression that was 90% grin and 10% genuine awe. Every single time, Hawks said as Izuku walked past. Izuku didn't respond. He kept walking. The hero billboard chart released an emergency update the following morning. Number 1, Kijin. Izuku Midoriya, age 16. Endeavor submitted his formal resignation from the top spot before the public release. His letter to the ranking body was 3 sentences. The third said, "I was always a placeholder." He didn't burn anything when he wrote it. Hawk's message arrived within the hour. "Told you. You took the long way, though." Izuku read it, showed it to Mina. Then he replied, "You should have the 2. Hawks replied in under a second. "Obviously." Something warm lived in that exchange. Neither of them would name it. All Might, watching the broadcast from his apartment, sat in his comfortable chair with a blanket across his lap and a cup of tea going cold beside him. He saw the ranking update scroll across the screen. He sat very still for a long time. "I did say the future was in good hands," he said to the empty room. He finished his tea. He smiled. The real one. Small and tired and genuine. And several years later, on a morning in spring, Izuku Midoriya sat on the balcony of an apartment on the 5th floor of a building in Musutafu, with a view of the city below, and the sky above, and a cup of tea cooling on the railing beside him. The apartment was new, large, full of light, not the apartment where Inko had raised him. This one was theirs, Izuku and Mina's, and it carried the evidence of a life built together in every room. Her color everywhere, his discipline underneath it, the tension between pastel chaos and military order that somehow produced something beautiful. His katana rested across his knees. The same one, the one Kuroda forged when he was 8. Unnamed, still an extension of his arm. The black cord on the handle was worn smooth from years of grip. The spring air was warm. The city was waking below. He could hear it. The trains, the traffic, the distant hum of millions of lives in motion. Inko still came every Sunday. She still cried. She still baked cakes that were slightly burned and told him the balcony was too high and asked if he was eating enough. He always said yes. Mina always winked at him behind Inko's back. He heard the sound from inside the apartment. Small. A different rhythm than Mina's. He set down his tea. He stood. The room was soft yellow. A window with a sunflower curtain that Mina had picked and he had hung. A bed shaped like a crescent moon. And in that bed, sitting up with an expression that was entirely too familiar, was their daughter, Shuna. Mina had chosen the name. She remembered a conversation years ago on a different rooftop about the things Izuku carried without knowing where they came from. He had said once that names sometimes belonged to things before the things existed. She had filed it away. When their daughter was born, pink-skinned and dark-eyed with a single small horn on her forehead and a tuft of crimson hair, Mina had said the name like she was completing a sentence she'd been holding for years. Shuna. She was 3. She looked at him from the bed with serious black eyes shot through with gold in the pupils. One small horn, smooth, slightly curved. Her hair was wild crimson streaked with pink, his color and Mina's twisted together, already untamable. Up, she said. Good morning to you too. Up, she repeated. Both arms out, non-negotiable. He crossed the room, lifted her, settled her against his chest. She grabbed a fistful of his crimson hair immediately. This was, apparently, the most important thing about him. He reached for the small wooden katana on the shelf by her bed. She accepted the trade. She held it up and examined it with tremendous seriousness. That, she announced, is mine. Correct. Mine. Yes, you've established that. She looked at him. Her small face shifted into the expression. The one Mina said was entirely him. The one he said was entirely Mina. The one that was perfectly, equally both. The expression that said, I have decided something, and reality should adjust accordingly. I want to fight monsters, she said. You are 3. I know. Talk to me when you're 5. She considered this with impressive gravity. Then, okay. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The wooden katana pressed between them. He carried her to the balcony. They stood in the spring morning, the 3-year-old with crimson hair and black eyes and one small horn, and the man who had held the #1 hero spot since he was 16. The city moved below them. The sky stretched above, #1. The world had gotten used to it. The way the world gets used to facts. The media called him the war god. The agency called him Kijin. Children drew him in crayon, with black fire coming from his hands, and believed they had captured something. He was also the man who braided his daughter's hair every morning, who couldn't sleep past 5, who woke before Mina and made her tea because it was the first promise he'd ever kept to himself, and he was a man who kept his promises. Behind them, a sound. The shuffle. The door slid open. Mina, in one of his shirts, hair enormous, squinting against the morning light. You 2 started the day without me. You needed sleep. Mama, Shuna said, reaching. She dropped the wooden katana on Izuku's foot without a single backward glance. Priorities, Mina took her, settled her on her hip, leaned into Izuku's side. He wrapped his arm around her, and they stood like that. The 3 of them on the balcony, Shuna pointing at things in the city below and naming them wrong, Mina gently correcting her, Izuku correcting neither. She looked up at him. Pink skin in the morning light. Golden eyes, the small horns catching the sun. She was more beautiful than she had been at 12, at 15, at 20. She had been extraordinary at all of those. She said, Hey, happy? He looked at her, at Shuna, who had discovered a bird on a distant rooftop and was narrating its life story to no one. At the city below, which he knew and protected and had carved his name into so deeply that generations would find the marks. At the katana leaning against the railing, still nameless, still enough, he looked back at Mina. Always, he said. She smiled. The smile that lit rooms on fire more effectively than his quirk ever could. The smile he had been watching for years and still watched the way people watch the sun. She leaned up and kissed him. Brief, warm, the kind that came with total familiarity and still made her cheeks flush a shade darker. Win everything today? She asked. He smiled. The real one, the one that softened the sharp lines of his face and made his red eyes warm instead of burning. I always do. She punched his shoulder. Cocky, she said. Accurate, he said. Shuna, who had been tracking the bird on the rooftop, turned around and observed her parents with the profound judgment of a 3-year-old who had decided that adults were confusing, but mostly acceptable. Cocky, she said, pointing at her father. Mina lost it. Completely. She was laughing so hard that Shuna nearly slid off her hip. Izuku caught his daughter with one hand, automatic, effortless, the reflexes of a man who had spent a lifetime catching things that mattered, and set her back in place. His expression was flat on the surface and warm underneath, the way it always was, the way Mina had always been able to read. The city moved below them. The spring wind stirred crimson and pink hair. The story does not end here. Stories like this never truly end. They find places to breathe. But this moment, this particular morning, with the light, this specific shade of gold, and these specific people standing in it, this is what it was all for. This is what it was always for.
The hero roster. A massive salute to the legends backing this journey. Your support is what keeps the momentum at an all-time high and the dream moving forward. You guys are the absolute best. Pro heroes, the elite front line, stepping up and setting the pace for the whole community. DA, Fire 05.
Symbol of peace, the pillars of the community, the titans who keep our foundation solid and the hype at an all-time high. Michael Worthy, Grand Regent KL, Sin Hunter, Deshaun Jones, Logan Bland, Alexander Johannes, Alex Morgan, Ray Various, Blaze, that other guy too, Chad Reynolds, Zakaria Allison, T Maki 68 Rimu, Nua, Kelvin Bowman, AZ00 Trees, Dweller of the Deepest Depths, Lone Wolf, The Lone One, Jacob Rops, Bully McGuire Shadow, Amiri B, Neostar Productions, Asael Cardenas, Shaquan Simmons, Thunder, Tsunawan 631, Elijah Saunders, Peter Hamilton, Freddie Rose, Omega, Akuma Noakami, Chris Talley, Remorsefuls, Black Vein, Joshua Hetherington, Aaron Abercrombie, Drift SK8er, Akano Himajima, Corey Tokars, Quan Yen Thompson, Yan, Devin Black, Dasher Games, Joe Bros, Ray Von Crimson River, Dante Allister, Adam Yonkers, Blood Saints, Donna Cafe, Zeph, KC, Howie 60, Ignacio, Carlos Terry. Hope of the Universe, the Ultimate Guardians, celestial tier supporters whose impact literally shines across the galaxy. Narole Uzumaki Uchiha, Keyshawn, Tayshawn Palmer, Coldbane 4, The Maniac 563, Debs, LS Morningstar, Marl, Spintown, Shoot 50, Greg Green, James, Juan, Zeno KJ.
And that right there is why Izuku Midoriya is built different. The horns, the katana, the black flames, the girl. He didn't become the #1 hero, he always was. If you want more stories that go this hard, subscribe. We are just getting started.